Number 5. Strange things in the skies. Now, I know I talked about this in a previous video, and if you're a really good top 5 scary fan, maybe you'll recognize some of these. But since I aired that last video, way more weird stuff has happened, so it only seems fitting that we'd run through it once again. Starting on February 10th, yours truly's birthday by the way, there was a pattern of incredibly bizarre happenings in the skies, and some very, very dodgy answers from government officials who refused to confirm or deny anything, which always seems more suspicious than less. So here's a quick Cole's Notes play-by-play of the last few weeks. On February 10th, US fighter jets brought down a still unidentified object over the coast of Alaska. This object has not been confirmed what it is at all or identified, but it's been confirmed as not being a balloon. Okay, that's one thing, only 1 million left to go. One official referred to it as being the size of a small car, which is definitely beyond strange. You think you would see that flying around? This single event would probably be enough to set tinfoil hats on fire and keep me in business for the next 2 years making videos about conspiracies, but the literal next day on February 11th, a UFO was shot down over Canada, around the Yukon. That's the big territory up on the left, right by Alaska. A US fighter jet downed this one, and it was described as being smaller than the first and cylindrical in nature, which is gonna come up a few times before this video is done, so hold on to that thought, there's still more. February 12th, we had something bizarre shot down over Lake Huron. An object that first appeared over Montana reappeared on Sunday before being shot down with an octagonal structure and strings hanging off of it, but it wasn't carrying anything, which is bizarre. And then over Billings, Montana, there was something very bizarre that was seen falling from the sky, leaving a thick orange chemtrail, and residents were left in the dark about it. Local residents wondered just what it was, and some Redditors in a group noticed around the area that there had been an increased military presence since the sighting. So just what is going on around here, there, and just about everywhere? But if you can't wait at all, and you just want to watch alien videos all day, I agree with you. That's what I do every single day, and it's a great way to live. Number 4, the Tom DeLonge sighting. If you're a UFO enthusiast, then you know that one of the leading names in UFO research and discovery right now is Tom DeLonge, the nasally voiced frontman for pop punk project Blink-182. And if you didn't know that, now you do. Although I suspect most of the people who watch our videos don't know that band. Anyway, little trivia for you. That's what he does when he's not selling out $300 concerts. He hunts aliens, and he's pretty good at it. If some of the footage he gathers is anything to go by, why don't you take a look at this weird footage he shared on his Instagram a couple days ago. It's gonna go right there. Pretty darn weird, huh? If that isn't one of the most clear, close encounters I've ever seen, I'm not sure what is. You can practically trace the outline of the flying saucer. It looks like the platonic flying saucer, like the one we all imagine when we close our eyes. I can almost see the little green man inside. On his Instagram, DeLonge wrote this caption: "Enjoy. They are real." To the Stars Media will be turning real events like these into major feature films and television series to bring the facts to the world. Note the whirling sound from the propulsion. Now, To the Stars is the fringe research company owned by Tom DeLonge, hoping to spread information and explore the possibility of UFOs and UAPs, and it does also sound like it's a plan to get Tom DeLonge some more money by making a cinematic alien universe. Whatever his endgame is though, can't deny the footage posted here is eerily compelling. Number 3, Gary McKinnon. Now, I've talked a bit about Gary McKinnon before on this channel because I am obsessed with this story. He's a notorious hacker who broke into NASA's security. His story is a cool one. I love anytime you hear someone pulling a fast one over a government agency like this, so it bears repeating. He's a genius computer hacker with a lot of spare time and wanted to know just what the Yanks were hiding from his home in Scotland. He wanted to go after NASA's data server to see if they had anything hidden they'd never told anybody about. Been called the biggest military hack of all time, so I'd wager maybe he found something. Why risk your life, career, freedom on this exactly? McKinnon claims he had received an insider tip that the US had reverse engineered technology from UFOs, free energy. In his own words, he said, "This should not be kept hidden from the public when pensioners can't even pay their fuel bills. And it's just like a bonus if you get some alien stuff on the side." So what did he find? McKinnon claims in his searching he saw images of aircraft that did not resemble any he had ever seen in his life. One in particular he describes as looking like a massive cigar-shaped craft floating over the northern hemisphere that did not look man-made. He said he was in shock looking at the image and didn't think to take a photo. Well, there's those cylindrical shaped crafts again. I told you to keep thinking about them, and keep thinking about them again, because they're going to show up one more time before this video is done. Well, that wasn't the only exciting thing he found. He also found something called the Disclosure Project, a 400-page document outlining testimonials from government agents across multiple branches of service recording sightings of unidentified objects, but that wasn't even the meal ticket. The real jewel was a document of a non-terrestrial officer's sheet. A spreadsheet listing the name of NASA agents to be transferred to new ships or serve onboard space stations, but McKinnon noted that none of the names of the vessels existed in any database. Now, I don't know how much you know about the US government, but they absolutely love it when you poke holes in their important security, triply so if you do it from the comfort of your bedroom in a country away. The US tried their level best to extradite McKinnon, but were prevented by the Crown from serving out a 70-year sentence. McKinnon is doing well. He recently took to the UFO subreddit to answer questions from fans and true believers. There wasn't a whole lot of new information, but it's just nice to know he hasn't been shoved into a black van somewhere. Number 2, the Navy and their pilots, Navy pilots. In September 2019, Navy spokesperson Joe Gradisher spoke out on 3 recently released videos by the Army that contained evidence of unexplained aerial phenomena. The Navy agreed that just this once, they would be willing to talk about something weird they'd seen and recorded, because pilots are reportedly encountering bizarre things every day and feel just too uncomfortable to report it. One pilot in particular, Ryan Graves, who's a 10-year vet, has said he believes he's seen thousands of unexplained phenomena in the air in his career, but these go unreported because of the stigma attached to the previous theories about what may or may not be in the videos, in his words. To translate that a bit in layman's terms, the Navy feels that they have to comment so that pilots are willing to talk about that, hey, maybe we're seeing UFOs without feeling too crazy. These videos in question were released from 2017 to 2018, and they feature long, oblong-shaped objects captured with infrared that disappear in the Earth's atmosphere. Hey, there it is again, more cylindrical-shaped UFOs. Now, I'll be clear, I don't really have much of a connection or through line here, but I do think it's very fascinating how many of these stories do mention these cylindrical-shaped objects. Far from the earliest or last, in 2004 and in 2015, 2 similar sightings were reported featuring similar vehicles. Now, the purpose of investigating most of these reports is more focused on safety hazards and threats of national security. And at the same time, maybe they're not openly admitting they've got UFOs flying around, but they're getting pretty darn close. The 2004 sighting, I think, is a particularly fascinating one. 2 pilots, one Commander Fravor and one Lieutenant Commander Slate, called it in, reporting that they saw objects out of nowhere at some 80,000 feet in the air, and then descending rapidly towards the Pacific Ocean, stopping at around 20,000 feet and hovering in place. They would drop out of radar range or shoot directly up in the sky on a 90-degree angle. You know, normal things aircrafts love to do. They weren't American crafts, and they weren't recognized by any organizations they'd ever seen. Maybe it's tech not of this world. Number 1, government councils. You know, the era we're in right now is probably one of the most fascinating times to be invested in UFOs and unexplained alien sightings, so consider yourself lucky, because it seems like we are getting dangerously close to a government finally confessing it. It feels like we're weeks away some days, you know? The UAP report was a seminal turning point when the Pentagon outright admitted they had thousands of documents and reports and investigations into the possibility of life somewhere out there in the Milky Way. Over the years, there have been a few investigations into unexplained aerial phenomena, but they're usually pretty hush-hush clandestine. Project Blue Book is probably the most famous secret project among them, but that was, you know, a secret. Well, in the interest of transparency, as of October 2022, NASA is coming clean, washing their hands, and opening a new study into the research of extraterrestrial life. 16 hand-picked scientists and specialists have been selected to analyze data and determine how best to go forward when observing events. And they're not really looking at past cases, they're more looking towards future things. And this project will include researchers, personnel from all divisions, including former astronaut Scott Kelly, who served as the pilot for the Discovery shuttle and also held the world record for most days in space. So I guess he probably knows 1 or 2 things about space, maybe, and I'm sure he's seen something weird. Kelly himself doesn't personally believe in aliens, saying, "I think there's probably intelligent life in the universe, but I don't think they visit planet Earth." Why not? We got lots of great stuff out here. We got water slides, we got Vin Diesel. No other planet has those 2 things, and I'm sure we got a couple other great things from the human experience. So aliens, come on down when you're ready. We'll welcome you with open arms, and If those were UFOs you sent, we're really sorry that we shot those down. I didn't have anything to do with that.
Since the beginning of 2023, the US government has added 366 new UFO sightings to their records. Of these 366, over half of them have been dismissed as unremarkable or explained as drones or balloons after investigation. However, this still leaves 171 which have not been explained, and have been described in the report as having demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities that require further analysis. With UFO sightings becoming more generally accepted, perhaps it is time to revisit some alien sightings that have been written off as a delusion in the past. Number 5. Hypnotic regression. Many people who claim to have been abducted by aliens are unable to remember a lot of the specific details of their abductions. Because of this and the public stigma against people with alien experiences, many people choose to never come forward, or their stories are written off as delusion. But in the spirit of giving people the benefit of the doubt, let's talk about a certain woman's experience with hypnotic regression. A woman who claims she was abducted by aliens was put under hypnosis in order to give a documentary crew information about the visitors from other worlds. When asked how aliens are able to travel at such incredible speeds, she responded with the following: "I can't explain it, but it's like if they want to get from one point to another point, they remove what's in between, so they don't have to travel that distance. They are instantly from there to there." When asked why aliens are studying humans, the response was, "They are very wary of humankind. Mankind is progressing technology-wise, and soon he's going to come across technology that will allow him to peel back the layers of dimensions. And they want to know all about man, for their own benefit. Man's warlike, aggressive, an animal. He's in possession of technology that is more than he is. There's no balance. And they're very wary that he's now on the threshold of many breakthroughs, one of which is peeling back dimensions. It's like an onion skin. You peel back one layer, and there's another one underneath, and another one underneath, and another one underneath. The same with dimensions. They're scared. Do aliens really study humanity out of a fear of what we will do once we discover interdimensional travel? And if so, how do they feel about all the UFOs we have apparently shot down? What do species historically do with groups that they are afraid of? What fate awaits the human race at the hands of these interplanetary visitors? Number 4. Sam the Sandown Clown. Our next story comes from the January-February edition of the British UFO Research Association Journal, and concerns an anonymous man going by the alias of Mr. Y, who claims that one October night in the year 1970, he was driving to visit a friend when he saw something hovering over the swamp to his right. It was a huge UFO with several different multicolored orb-like lights brightly illuminating the craft. He got out of his vehicle to observe the craft for a moment and then continued on his way. He looked out his window and realized that the craft was now following him, its lights spinning. Mr. Y got to his friend's house, and the friend was amazed at the guests that had followed him there, before disappearing into a nearby tree line. For years, Mr. Y would see the red orbs following him from time to time, watching him and stalking him. Doubting that anyone would believe him, he kept these encounters to himself until 1973, when his 7-year-old daughter Faye and her friend were playing near Lake Common Road when they heard an eerie wailing sound. They followed the sound to a nearby meadow, and the wailing stopped. They walked over a small bridge when suddenly a blue-gloved hand with 3 fingers appeared from under the bridge. They looked in the small river and saw a strange figure standing in the middle holding a book. He was described as being 7 feet tall and without a neck. He was wearing an odd and tattered costume consisting of a green tunic with a red collar, white pants, and a pointed hat with a black ball on top and 2 antennae. He had a pale white face, lips that never moved, red hair, and triangle holes for eyes. The children watched in shock as the figure hobbled over to a strange metal hut. Not long after, they saw the figure again as he wailed, and then spoke into a microphone asking if they were still there. He then communicated by writing in his book, saying that his name was Sam. They asked if he was a man, and he said no. They asked if he was a ghost, and he said, "Well, not really. But, in a way, I am. He said that there were others like him and that he was afraid of being attacked by humans. He invited them into his metal hut, which was filled with wooden furniture and elaborate knobs. The children hung out with Sam for an hour before leaving, and a year later, she told her father about the encounter, telling him that there had been men nearby fixing a post who had acted as though they could not see the strange creature. He had trouble believing her, but he had had enough experiences with aliens of his own that he had to consider the possibility that it was real. Did Mr. Y's daughter really see a strange alien in the woods, or is this just the overactive imagination of a child? In an age where spacecraft are being seen all over the world at an alarming rate, we really can't rule anything out. And what of the UFO stalking Mr. Y? What were they hoping to see, and why was he selected to be the subject of their curiosity? This mystery will likely never be fully unraveled. Number 3. Aliens take a baby. Our next entry comes courtesy of phantomsandmonsters.com and describes a 14-year-old visiting the home of some seniors and seeing something more terrifying than they could possibly imagine. As they themselves told it, I witnessed an alien abduction back in 2002 when I was 14. A friend of mine wanted me to help her grandparents set up their computer. I said sure and rode my bicycle to their house. I got there and clouds appeared, so I decided to make this a pretty quick visit. I set up the computer and installed some software for them, showing them all how it works and such. They go back and sit on the couch while I get my backpack to get ready to leave, as their other granddaughter, who is about 6 years old, was sleeping in the other room. All of a sudden, a cold breeze went through the room. It was odd, as all the doors and windows were shut. The grandparents looked towards the kitchen, and what I saw made me freeze in place. There were 3 creatures standing in the kitchen. 2 of them were short, gray alien creatures, with thicker necks than usually described, with the eyes closer to the sides of their heads. They wore silver jumpsuits. In between them was a taller creature that looked like a humanoid mantis, wearing a black robe with a yellow stripe going down the middle. They walked to another room, and a minute later returned with the robed creature, carrying the granddaughter in its arms. It's looking at me, and I get the feeling it knows who I am. I don't know why I got the feeling, but I did. I was very scared. The grandparents were looking at them too, but not doing anything. I thought, screw this, and fought off all the fear I could and clumsily charged towards them. I didn't even make 3 steps before the grandfather stopped me and told me they will bring her back. The creatures didn't move and continued to look at me. I couldn't get any more words out of my throat because I didn't even know what to think at this point. All of a sudden, a light stretched around them and they vanished. An odd glow remained for a few seconds before fading. After a minute of awkward silence and the grandfather repeating, "She will be brought back," soon I decided to leave. I rode my bicycle home as fast as I could while looking back, hoping that nothing was following me. I didn't sleep that night after I got home. The next day, I told my friend what had happened, and she told me it has happened before. The grandparents and other family members have tried to stop it, but to no avail. They just accepted it with a look of defeat and moved on. The granddaughter was brought back after a few hours. Not long after I witnessed this incident, their whole family moved elsewhere. I've heard from other people who claimed to experience similar events, and I feel they are legit. Why are aliens taking babies away from their families? What are they hoping to learn? And is there some way to stop them? One can hope, but it seems unlikely. Number 2, dream or abduction. This next story is from an anonymous Reddit user who claimed to be abducted and experimented on by aliens before waking up at home with injuries related to the experiment. As he told the story, in July of 2015, back when I was 19, I lived in a house in Southport, Sacramento with 3 other friends. I woke up one night to a light coming through the ceiling of my room, and it lifted me out of my bed. Next thing I know, I'm in some kind of chair and unable to control my body, like I was drugged with something. There were guys that were not human men, but gray people with large black almond-shaped eyes doing stuff with what seemed like medical instruments and machines. I was very terrified. I was unarmed, naked, unable to move. I was so scared. One of them was touching the machine that put the tube down my throat and into my stomach. His hand got close to my face because he had to adjust something holding my head in place. I remember getting a good look at his hand and eyes. They had long fingers with pads at the tips, sort of like salamanders, and they don't have fingernails. Their skin is gray, but kind of like a powdery translucent gray. They had large heads with small necks, so small and thin it didn't make sense. Their arms and fingers were long and skinny too. I was in the chair with my head and jaw held by something so I didn't see their feet. I'd say the tallest probably stood about the height of my lowest rib, and for reference, I'm 5'10". The tube machine sucked out the food I ate earlier that day, and then was pulled out of me. I don't remember how I got there, but then I remembered being in a cage made of some kind of metal that reminded me of aluminum. In a room with curved walls. In front of me was a man who looked a lot like a human, talking to a gray person on a window that lit up a screen like a hologram. The man was tall and looked like a human, except that his skin was very white and his hair was blonde and platinum. He spoke with a gray person on the holo screen in a language I didn't understand. He wore a blue flight uniform of some kind. This man was obviously military of some sort, judging by his uniform. The gray person spoke in a language that sounded like birds chirping. Once the call was over, the holo screen turned into a different display with symbols, and the man turned and walked to me. He crouched down and spoke to me in plain English and said to me, "Everything's gonna be fine. I'm going to get you out of here and take you home." I was so happy to hear that. He opened the cage, and next thing I know, I fell on top of my bed with my back hitting the mattress first. I immediately got out of bed right after I fell. Was this a real alien abduction or simply a horrible nightmare? Typically, I would think it was merely a bad dream, but the user describes extreme pain in his throat for days afterwards from the tube being forced into him. What was the source of this pain if it was simply a dream? Truly a strange encounter to contemplate. Number 1. The alien and the bassinet. Our final story is another from phantomsandmonsters.com about a woman who was asleep in bed next to her baby's bassinet before waking up and seeing something that would make any mother panic. The following is an excerpt from her account. "I turned over on my side, facing the bassinet, and noticed a bright light coming in between the window blinds. I thought out loud, is it morning already? The light was coming in between the blinds and it was so bright, but the rest of the room was dark. There was also a bright light on the wall next to the window, and I looked up to see where the light was coming from. To my horror, just above the bassinet was an alien's gray face. It was just the head, no upper body, legs, or arms. The head was dark in color, very round, ending in a pointed chin, and there was a small slit for a mouth. The nostrils were small, but the eyes were large and almond-shaped and very shiny black. It had some sort of glass lamp on the top of its head. The light on the wall was projected from the lamp. Then I noticed that the being was looking down at my baby daughter. Oh my god, I couldn't speak. My heart started pounding so hard that I started trembling uncontrollably. It saw me and realized I was looking at it. The being moved towards me and I started screaming and swinging my arms. I remember that I screamed out loud for it to leave. It floated from its original position above the bassinet to just above my face. I remember seeing this light blue fog build up in front of my face, and then in a dreamlike manner, I heard a cooing sound similar to mourning doves. I had the feeling that whoever was talking to me was stern and was telling me that it was for our own good. The woman then describes waking up with a sore spot on her head and the alien being gone without a trace. She insists it was not a dream and that she really saw an alien creature that she believes will one day return. For her sake, let us hope it was simply a dream.
Number 5. The Barney and Betty Hill incident. The case of Barney and Betty Hill has puzzled UFO enthusiasts for generations and is considered one of the most well-documented, well-discussed UFO abduction stories, and also President Obama's favorite. He's making a documentary on it. In 1961, a young couple, Betty and Barney Hill, were driving home through New Hampshire when they saw a bright light flying through the sky. 2 hours later, they found themselves back in their driveway without knowing what had happened, confused, shocked, and afraid. The couple claimed that they traveled to a star system 39 light years from Earth, Zeta Reticuli. Before this point, there weren't really many widespread stories of abductions in the United States, so this story caught on wildly. As they were driving home, the couple noticed something bright in the sky. Feeling dizzy and drowsy, the two of them found themselves asleep and waking up in their driveway, completely lost as to how they got there. When they'd awoken, Betty was convinced that they'd experienced a close encounter and went to Air Force to report their sightings. They would spend the next 2 years explaining their case to various government officials and medical professionals. Mr. Barney Hill would go on to recount to a psychiatrist that he was having nightmarish, repetitive dreams. He would recall these creatures with slanted eyes and gray skins that took them on board and experimented on them by taking samples of their flesh and hair. The two underwent hypnosis therapy from a licensed psychologist in hopes to uncover what they could have experienced and repressed. And shockingly, Betty Hill was able to draw a map of the stars seemingly from memory, a planet orbiting Zeta Reticuli. The map was nearly spot on, a near perfect recreation of the stars surrounding the actual solar system. This event would end up leading to the Air Force launching Project Blue Book, the clandestine program to research UFO and abduction stories and investigate just what's out there. And if you're looking for more UFO content, even stuff on Project Blue Book, we've got all of that and then some. Come take a look through at all the declassified files, stories of abductions, sightings, close encounters, and way way, way more. So stay subscribed, stay scared, but more importantly, stay watching this video. I worked hard on it. We got lots more abduction stories coming up for you in just a second. Number 4, Terrell Copeland. For some, too many abduction stories come from a disreputable source, you know? Well, our next story comes from a former United States Marine, Terrell Copeland, a man who'd seen the brink and back and had never been shook like this before in his life. Pop those ears open and take a listen. Copeland reported this in 2007. He was living in his Virginia apartment when he saw an orb of white light across the street and hovering in the air, some 300 meters above the ground and changing colors rapidly. Now, Terrell had the same reaction most people like you and I might have seeing a glowing, colorful disco ball in the sky, and he thought, well, that's kind of weird, something's wrong. So he recorded it, posted footage online, and claims this is where his life took a dark turn. He was taking a nap in his apartment, and he said it sounded as if someone was breaking in. He called out into the darkness, asking who was invading his space, and he saw the doorknob move and heard scratching at his door. He grabbed a firearm that he kept in his apartment and went to go ready it, but found himself completely frozen, unable to move no matter how bad he wanted to. He claims he heard a voice that spoke to him, internally, as if it was his own thoughts, saying, "You don't need to do that. We won't harm you." I'm pretty sure if I heard that from inside my head, I would leap out my window just to be safe and take my chances somersaulting down the road because I'm probably safer there. Now, doctors thought this incident was sleep paralysis, a condition in which one can experience vivid auditory and visual hallucinations during a period of insomnia and even freeze up. But Copeland would complain of hours missing that he couldn't remember. He said there was a span of about 4 hours over the course of 2 nights that he couldn't remember a single second of. So Copeland began to keep notes and sketches of his memories as he started to have these blocked memories resurfacing. He claimed that he saw a person with an elongated skull and pitch black eyes, and said he had a vivid memory of standing on a balcony waving at a cylinder-shaped ship. On a positive note for all of this, Copeland says that he doesn't believe this incident has haunted him, but feels that it's made him a better person and asking more questions, and it's definitely given him a story to tell at parties. Number 3, Frederick Valentich. Frederick Valentich was an Australian pilot. He was well trained, and he was an avid enthusiast of UFOs and extraterrestrials. Lucky for him, he might have seen one. Sadly for him, it was the last time anyone saw him. It was 1978, and Frederick disappeared over his 125 nautical mile training flight over the Australian mainland. While at 4,500 feet in the air, Valentich reported that there was an unidentifiable craft following behind him. Melbourne Flight Services insisted that there wasn't any other aircraft in the space with him, but Frederick replied back, "No, there's something on my tail." He described it as glowing with 4 repeating bright lights and rushing past him. Valentich said it was shiny, metallic, and chrome, and he was on radio with air control for 5 minutes before he started mysteriously experiencing engine trouble. The flight controller asked him again what was following him. Valentich responded, "It's hovering and it is not an aircraft." And this was the last thing anyone ever heard from Frederick Valentich. Authorities were completely unable to recover his craft, and after an intense search, threw their shoulders up at a loss. A local farmer alleged that he had seen a strange flying object in the sky the same day as Valentich's disappearance. The farmer went on to explain that he claims he saw the plane attached to this UFO. He told officials that he was scared to tell anyone about what he had seen for fear he would be the town laughingstock if he was a farmer raving about a UFO. Tragically, in the end, we're no closer to understanding what happened to Frederick now than we were all those years ago in 1978. Did Frederick get his wish? Did he get to see an alien up close? Did they take him back to the stars? Or who knows? And we may never know. I don't know. Number 2, Travis Walton. Alien abduction stories can be a little much sometimes. I'm sure you can agree. Even for those with very open minds, you know, they all seem kind of the same, and usually you can poke holes through them and find all the little weird details that don't add up. Well, take a listen to this one. Travis Walton's story is one of the most famous abduction examples on record. You might be familiar with it before if you study UFO stuff a lot. I've covered it a few times on this channel before because I think it is one of the most fascinating abduction stories. So let's hear it. In 1975, Travis Walton was working as a logger on an otherwise unremarkable day. And he was with 6 other loggers driving around in the forest when they saw something incredibly bright shining at them through the treetops. One of the men claimed that it looked like a flattened saucer. Walton stepped out of the truck to investigate and was struck by some invisible force that had knocked him backward. This startled the rest of the crew, who drove off in a flurry. And it's a great way to find out who your real friends are. Your real friends are not the guys who will leave you in the woods where you're about to get abducted. I wouldn't do that to you. When the crew returned, Walton had vanished. Travis awoke and had thought that he'd been taken to a hospital because suddenly he found himself himself in a blindingly bright, sterile room and could hear people moving around him. But it wasn't until he got a good look at his doctors that he realized something was very wrong. 3 feet tall, brown quarter-sized pupils, and marshmallow-like skin. Walton freaked out, I think as most of us probably would do, and was restrained by his captors. He fought them off, but was greeted by a tall creature that he said resembled human, but was masked by an intimidating helmet, kind of a Darth Vader deal. This masked creature took Walton and escorted him back into the operating room, put a translucent mask over his face, while Walton drifted out of consciousness over and over again, unsure if anything that was happening was real. The next thing he remembers is walking alongside a highway as if nothing had ever happened. He eventually found his way to a phone and called for his brother-in-law, who panickedly asked what had happened. It turned out that Walton had been gone for 5 days. He was untraceable. Search parties had formed looking for him, sent dogs and choppers, tracked him from the woods, but no one could find any sign of him, as if he'd blinked right out of existence, and then blinked right back. Travis swore what happened to him was absolutely real, an abduction, and he's maintained this ever since that fateful week in 1975. Now, if you really think this story is fascinating, and you wish you could have seen some footage of what Travis described, unfortunately he didn't bring his camcorder. You can, however, watch a 90s movie directly based off the case called Fire in the Sky. It's on Amazon Prime or something, I'm sure. And finally, number 1, the Berkshire incident. Now here's the thing with most UFO sightings. They're isolated scenarios, you know? One sleep-deprived night watchman sees something weird out the corner of his eye. Somebody up way too late sees something up in the sky. It's hard to believe just one person's story. That's why it's significantly harder to write off the experience of Berkshire County, where half the town reported seeing the same UFO. Uncanny and unprecedented. 250 residents and more all reported seeing the same UFOs flying across the night sky. So it was 1969. Multiple residents across town spotted blinding lights above Sheffield in the southern Berkshires. Witnesses reported that the lights they saw were beaming from saucers, bright lights onto the horizon. Some residents said that they felt that time was slowing down as they watched the object, claiming that it left them frozen and stunned, wondering just what it was they were looking at. One witness comes from a young student, one Thomas Reed, who said that he saw one of the floating entities, a glowing orb, dashing outside the forest. He claims he heard an eruption of crickets and frogs and a loud deafening sound, and then inexplicably 2 hours had passed without anyone understanding why or how. His mother and grandmother had switched car seats as well. Now, as an adult, Thomas Reed claims that over time his family has corroborated what had happened to them. He speaks of being in this immensely large, almost infinitely spanning metal hangar with hallways and hallways stretching out forever. Thomas Reed took a polygraph test telling this story and was found to be 99.1% truthful. Multiple people across Berkshire that day reported similar stories. Balls of light, flying saucers, losses of time, finding themselves somewhere they couldn't explain. The residents of Berkshire may never get to the bottom of what happened there, but I know the truth is out there. And I know Top 5 Scary is gonna find it, I'm pretty sure.
Since the beginning of 2023, the US government has added 366 new UFO sightings to their records. Of these 366, over half of them have been dismissed as unremarkable or explained as drones or balloons after investigation. However, this still leaves 171 which have not been explained and have been described in the report as having demonstrated unusual flight characteristics or performance capabilities that require further analysis. Number 5. The uninvited house guests. Our first tale of the day comes from a woman in South Australia who was having a boring and typical day, getting the cleaning done and just generally living her life, when she suddenly found that she was not alone and that there were strange creatures unlike anything she had ever seen in her home. This is her story in her own words. "I don't wish to give my name. I was a teacher in South Australia for many years. In 1976, I was hoovering my sitting room floor at about noon. Suddenly, I felt quite ill and thought I was going to be sick. So, I sat down on the sofa to see if the sick feeling would subside. I then saw that I was not alone. There were 3 strange little people standing alongside the sofa, just looking at me. I froze with fear, as I had never seen anything like them before, not even in films. 2 of them were short and fat, about 4 to 4.5 feet tall, with broad faces and enormous black eyes, but with only a hint of where a nose or mouth might have been, almost like a pencil drawing. They had wispy bits of brown hair at the back of their heads, and they were wearing brown shrouds or robes. These beings, I knew instinctively, were the workers. The other being was female, thin and about 5 feet tall. She wore a black shroud and had black wispy hair at the back of her head. Her face was very elongated, with huge, dark, piercing eyes. Like the others, there was just a hint of where a nose or mouth should have been. The thin one started to speak to me with her mind and told me I was to go with them. I said in my own mind that I would not go. Somehow, this telepathic communication seemed perfectly normal at the time, and I felt quite comfortable communicating like that. I was very frightened, but I could still communicate and understand. I was so frightened because it seemed they were pulling me away with their minds. I had to struggle to resist them. At one point, I remember falling down and trying to crawl towards the door. I must have fainted or something because I have no memory from that point onwards. When my husband came home at the usual time, I realized that I had lost about 4 hours. I still have no explanation for this experience. Did this woman really do psychic battle with aliens in her living room? Or did she simply suffer some kind of temporary insanity that caused her to hallucinate and lose time? Regardless of the answer, the experience caused her to feel true terror almost beyond description, whether the cause was real or not. Number 4. Honk if you love alien Jesus. Next up, we have a minister who believes that he is in contact with strange aliens who are dedicated to spreading the word of love and peace throughout the universe. As he put it, I wish to remain anonymous because I am a minister of the Baptist Church in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and some people might think that what I have experienced is against religion. I have had 3 meetings with humanoid beings from the planet Koshnak, located in the vicinity of the constellation of Orion. Their vehicles can travel in space and can also somehow pass through our planet. These beings appeared to me to have melon-shaped, completely expressionless faces, with thin lips, tiny noses and ears, and extremely large eyes without pupils. Their eyes are green, with scintillating flashes. Their expression in the eyes is intense. They always seem friendly. One of them is called Ohenesto, and he is the one who mainly communicates with me. This is a kind of telepathic communication. He tries to explain complicated ideas of time and space to me. He has told me that they travel in the 7th and 8th dimensions, which are unknown to Earth humans. These beings are aware of 13 dimension. Their lifespan is about 800 to 1,000 of our years. They can continue life forever with only one cell of their body. They are beings of other dimensions, of other worlds, but they are not gods. From time immemorial, teachers of light came to our planet from other planets, from other systems, even from other galaxies and realms, known to us as the non-physical or supernatural realms of existence. Great companies of light came into incarnation on our Earth, carrying with them the message of truth and love and light. I believe that our Lord Jesus Christ is one of these beings. Number 3. Alien Dance Party. Next, we have a rather strange tale from a man who claims that when he was young, he was transported to a pavilion filled with aliens who were having an intergalactic sock hop. Is this truth or madness? I'll let you be the judge. When I was young, I had some very strange experiences which affected my entire life. This was in the 1930s. In 1935, I had pneumonia, which in those days was a dangerous and sometimes fatal disease. One evening, right at the dark, 2 beings came to the window in an elongated envelope. They and their conveyance were like the Northern Lights. They asked me to go with them, and each took a hand. When they touched me, it was like being lightly tickled. Very pleasurable. The odd part was that you could see through them, but they were there, and we talked without sound. They took me to a huge pavilion where couples were dancing. My impression was that the males were dressed in black and white trim. The females were dressed the opposite way. There was no ceiling, but crystals hung above and made music beyond comparison that sounded to me like wind chimes. I had 3 visits to this place in all. On the last visit, a female asked me why I was afraid of the dark. She said to me that both the light and the dark are my benefactors, and they would make them equal. She took a crystal and placed it in the palm of my left hand. For a moment, it resembled the Star of David, 2 triangles. Then it melted and ran between my fingers. After that, my night vision changed. My eyes would adjust quickly so that I could see even when it was pitch black. I recovered quickly from my illness. A few months later, on a camping trip, I found I was the only one awake late at night, watching undulating shafts of bright light. The shafts of light began a strange, seemingly patterned movement. I was trying to puzzle this out when suddenly there appeared my transparent envelope in what looked like an oval cylinder. It just seemed correct to get in. In an instant, I was inside the pavilion again, but the beings were not dancing as before. They seemed to be conversing silently, but not with me. A female asked me to step up on the dais, because I was their conductor. Number 2. The secrets of the universe revealed. This next story features a man who made the acquaintance of an alien race who taught him about the building blocks of our very universe, which was pretty cool of them. This is his story. I am a graphic designer with a good visual memory. What I saw was visually very vivid, but it doesn't make much sense. However, it may have been the most important thing that ever happened to me. In November 1980, my wife and I were driving north of Dundee when suddenly I saw a cerulean blue light pointing at our car from the sky. After that, I have a fragmented memory. We both have a fragmented memory of some bizarre events, but there are a lot of gaps. Basically, we somehow lost about an hour's time. I remember seeing a hairless, tall, man-like being in a blue robe. He was looking at us, inviting us aboard his craft telepathically. His costume struck me as absurd. He was the leader in a blue cape. The cape looked stupid, illogical. He was mentally luring us up to the spacecraft. Somehow, the next thing was, we were on board a ship of some kind, being examined, quite painlessly, by another being wearing a yellow robe with ruffled collar. Also, somehow completely absurd, incongruous. Suddenly, the examination process turned nasty. I felt my mind was being forcibly invaded. I had no control. My brain felt like there was a tunnel that goes through my mind to theirs. Our minds are connected. It could have been a tube or a tunnel of light, gray-brown. It was horrible. It pulled everything out of my head. There was a terrible sound, piercing, high-pitched. My thoughts had turned to goo, but I could see them visually. They had my mind, but I still had it too. Then it seemed as though I was okay again, but I felt completely different mentally. I can't explain this, but there's more to it than anyone knows. There's more to life, more to the world. There's more to everything than anybody knows. More dimensions than things coexisting. There are many more than 3 dimensions. Everywhere, it all works together. Everything coexists. I still can't explain all these thoughts, where they came from, and so on. Number 1. A UFO sighting. To end our compilation, I have selected a story of a UFO sighting. Not really much else to say about it. Let's dive in. My name is John Healy. At the time of making this officially transcribed statement, I was a detective with the Cleveland Police Department. I was also a U.S. Army reservist, training as a flight medic. The incident occurred when I was traveling on a helicopter with 3 other reservists on the evening of October 18th, 1973, about 10:30 p.m. We were halfway between Columbus and Cleveland, near Ashland, when the crew chief saw a red light on the horizon. He asked the pilot if there were any towers around there, and was told there were not. As we went along at an altitude of about 3,000 feet, the light seemed to be growing brighter and brighter. It appeared to be on a collision course with us. It kept coming right at us. The pilot had to put our helicopter into a power dive to avoid it. We were looking right through the windshield, watching this thing, and it damn near came to a stop right over us. It just hovered for a while. We all got a very good look at it. It had a steady red light on its prow. It was cigar-shaped. There were no wings on it. It made no noise, created no air turbulence, shining down out of aft end. It shone down and on us, and you could see a definite cone shape, the shape of the green light beam. I've seen aircraft from PTI-9s up to C-5As, so I know an aircraft when I see one at night. But this thing scared the living hell right out of me. We contacted Mansfield Airport and told them we were almost in a collision with an unidentified flying object, operating at 3,000 feet and 600 knots. Mansfield never acknowledged our broadcast. We tried to get a hold of Cleveland Airport and we couldn't until the object passed over us. It continued to the west, picked up speed, and we lost it over the horizon. We never saw it again. We talked about this sighting all the way back and we just couldn't dope it out. The thing didn't have wings, but at 3,000 feet, you have to have wings to stay aloft. It couldn't have been a dirigible or a Zeppelin because those things don't move at the speed this thing moved. Clandestine aircraft wouldn't operate at that speed at that low an altitude. All 4 of us filed official reports.
In 5th place today, we have the footage the Pentagon refuses to release from Alaska. Between the dates of February 4th to the 12th of 2023, 4 different unidentified objects were shot down over Alaska, South Carolina, the Yukon, and the Great Lakes. While cockpit audio from F-16 pilots who shot down the UFOs over Lake Huron was released, a spokesman for the Pentagon has confirmed that the footage will not be released in the near future, being quoted directly saying, "I can tell you that there is not currently any images or video footage that we can release. The imagery remains classified, and I have not received any information as to the potential timeline on a change in classification." This refusal is a drastic difference in comparison to the quick release of an Air Force photo of what is believed to have been a Chinese spy balloon that was shot down at the same time over on the East Coast, and footage from when a Russian plane appeared to intentionally collide with a drone last March. Noted UFO researcher John Greenwald requested the footage and photos of the UFO shootdowns be released via a Freedom of Information Act request, with the Pentagon claiming national security exemptions to deny this request. An Air Force official said that the images would reveal cryptology and national security concerns if released, and even the Canadian RCMP are playing coy, having ended their public search for the remains. Now, I don't know about y'all, but that sounds pretty dang suspicious to me. Hey, anyone want to take a random trip to the Yukon just to sightsee? Totally not to recover UFO debris or anything suspicious.
Number 4, the observatory. In 2007, astronomer Alberto Meyer, living in Busta Arezizo, Italy, and I butchered that pronunciation, made an incredible discovery, almost completely by accident, which is where most scientific progress gets made. He was adjusting the focus of his telescope when he spotted and tracked a UFO as it flew across the surface of the moon. Now the video shows the portions of the moon that he was focused on in close-up mode while tracking a solid black object as it flew over the surface of the moon. And look, I could just describe what is going on in this video, but I could also let you get your peepers on it and let you decide for yourself. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, so here's roughly 24,000 words worth of context. Take yourself a look. Pretty weird, huh? That round black object is tracked as he catches just after it passing the Wallace crater, and yeah, this is how I'm learning that parts of the moon were named. I didn't know there was moon geography. It hovers and hesitates before making a sudden change of path at an exact 45-degree angle. Take your protractor out. The precision and control is what's giving people pause, you know? It seems to move as if it's being controlled, and with such mechanical dominance that it seems like it has to be something that's being intentionally driven, and not just a strange rock floating through the stars, or I'm gonna be honest, a bug crawling on the lens, which is what I thought it might be. Now, commenters on the video, because this thing went viral when it got posted, pointed out that the object does not decrease in size at all, suggesting that the object isn't close to the moon, and rules out the theory that this is a shadow on the surface of the moon from a large object overneath. I'm only capable of so much, I'm gonna be honest. The science stuff, that's kind of above my pay grade, but I can confirm and offer my speculation on when videos of UFOs look weird, and that's exactly what's going on here. So is this a UFO? Who is to say?
Alrighty, in our third place position, we have the Guy Hotel Memo. It's the most requested document in the FBI's archives, right after the photo of Elvis and Nixon riding with an alien. The file has been checked out roughly 1 million times in the last 2 years alone. So far as KG cover-ups go, this one's fairly out in the open, but that doesn't make it any less invigorating. It's a single page, an unconfirmed report the FBI never even followed up on. The file in question? It's a memo dated back to March of 1950, authored by one Guy Hotel, who served as the director of the FBI field office in Washington, D.C., addressed to FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. In the memo, Hotel was relaying a story seen by an Air Force pilot about something bizarre they had seen in New Mexico, right around the time of Roswell fever. The memo describes flying saucers, circular in shape with raised centers, approximately 50 feet in diameter. It goes on to say that inside each saucer was a flight crew, each occupied by 3 bodies of roughly human shape, but only 3 feet tall, and bandaged in a manner similar to the blackout suits used by speed flyers and test pilots. The memo goes on to claim that the crafts were found because an aircraft radar had interfered with the controlling mechanisms of the saucer, and concludes by saying, no further evaluation was ever attempted. It seems like it should be a significantly bigger deal than that, no? No further evaluation? That's fine. Someone in the Air Force claims that they saw a series of flying saucers, piloted by tiny men in shiny spacesuits not even 3 years after the Roswell incident, set New Mexico news stations ablaze. But hey, it's probably nothing. At least there's some comfort in knowing that the government has always behaved like this when it comes to investigating and reporting on possible UAP and UFO sightings. Now, admittedly, there's no footage or photography of the incident to speak of, and it's a bit more government-approved hearsay. Whatever was seen on that day could have been something huge, or it could have been bogus. I suppose we'll never know, but it is worth mentioning that Project Blue Book was launched not even 2 years later, investigating UFO sightings in the Air Force, so that's all I'm gonna say on the subject.
Number 2, the Ryan Graves report. Lieutenant Ryan Graves is a studied Air Force pilot. If you're a super big UFO enthusiast, you might even recognize the name. He's an FA-18 Super Hornet pilot who has flown the skies for 10 years and has seen countless UFOs in his time flying for the Navy, seeing all manner of things he couldn't explain. He spoke out saying, "These things would be out here all day. Keeping an aircraft in the air requires a significant amount of energy with the speeds we observed, and 12 hours in the air is about 11 hours longer than we'd expect." Now, one particular incident occurred in late 2014, when a Super Hornet pilot nearly crashed into one of these objects alongside Graves. Some of these objects were caught on plane camera, and we have got some of that footage for you here today. The pilot and his wingman were flying in tandem about 100 feet apart over the Atlantic East when something flew between them. Graves said that the object looked like a sphere encasing a cube, regular shape a plane would be. The pilots were concerned because were these things a covert drone program or something suspicious and secretive, government officials would have at least warned them, since they had fighter jets flying around for fear of collision. This was the reason the Navy was concerned that perhaps there was more to investigate with this particular encounter of unexplained aerial phenomenon. What was truly unsettling the pilots, besides the fact that there was almost a huge safety crash error there, some of that's words, right? And that was that these crafts were accelerating to hypersonic speeds, and then they would stop and turn on a dime, which is not really something the human pilots are capable of, even our best and brightest, Sorry Goose and Maverick. So what did the pilots think they were dealing with? Graves spoke out, saying, "We have helicopters that can hover. We have aircraft that can fly at 30,000 feet and right at the surface, but combine all of that into one vehicle of some type with no jet engine, no exhaust plume. So what do we think, my goblins and my ghouls? This does definitely seem like something worth digging into, doesn't it? Definitely seems suspicious, to say the least."
Finally, in first place, we have the 2004 series of spottings. On November 14th of 2004, Lieutenant Alex Dietrich was piloting her FA-18 Super Hornet when she observed an oblong object hovering over the water. It leapt into motion, skimming 500 to 1,000 feet over the waves at around 500 knots, and for those of us Canadian civilians, that's around 925 kilometers per hour. The fighter jet's onboard radar couldn't detect the object, but Alex's weapons system operator in the rear seat, who, her name's not public, witnessed it as well. Dietrich has quoted her recollection as, "We were trying to call out what we are seeing to each other and to make sure everybody else is seeing it. It's moving so erratically and so fast that our voices, our minds, and then our radio calls can't keep up with it." The majority of credible modern-day UFO sightings can be credited to those that work in the Air Force, and it should be noted that military pilots are trained at what they call REAS, short for reconnaissance, and referring more specifically in this case to the art of recognizing aircrafts by their shapes, paint schemes, unit insignia, and more. On one of the other Super Hornets that launched behind Alex was Lieutenant Commander Chad Underwood, who was able to capture the object on an infrared camera. It was 40 feet long, round and smooth, and quickly received the nickname Tic Tac. Now, I'll let the footage that the US government has confirmed as authentic and unexplained speak for itself, since I know we have the clip handy. Around this time, starting on November 10th to be exact, Gary Voorhees, a petty officer on the USS Princeton guided missile cruiser, had been reporting apparitions on his radar screens in the same area. Triple checking his equipment before he made his report, and being the main technician responsible for the equipment, along with having 6 years of Navy experience at the time, Voorhees described what he was seeing as impossible. In just seconds, an object had dropped to the waterline from 60,000 feet, hovered, and then zipped away at high velocity, making right-angle turns that were quoted as being confounding and defying gravity. Calm down, Wicked fans, I know what I said. The objects returned for the next week, with Voorhees quoted as saying, "I was able to see it on the horizon during the night and during the day, and it was definitely a glowing object. Could I tell you for 100% certainty what it was we were tracking? No." Now, footage of this event used to exist, with Gary being able to vividly describe his memories, but has since been completely scrubbed from the internet. Now, where have I heard that before?
Number 5. The Navy pilots. Since the release of the UAP documents, the new nomenclature, UFO fever has been in the air more than ever since Roswell. We've got open confirmation that the US government, the Pentagon, is researching actively the possibility of alien craft outright. That's the craziest thing that's ever happened in my life. In September 2019, Navy spokesperson Joe Gradisher confirmed that 3 recently released videos by the military contain evidence of unidentified aerial phenomenon. Like, that's it. This is the Navy, the government pointing to a video and going, yeah, that's an unidentified flying object that we don't know about. They're not saying it's a weather balloon. balloon. They're not saying it's stars. They're not outright saying it's an alien, but they're certainly implying it. The Navy agreed that they would confirm the sightings this time, because pilots encounter bizarre sightings all the time, but are usually too concerned to report the sightings because of the stigma attached to previous theories about what may or may not be in those videos. Put gently, it means that the Navy felt like they had to comment on this thing so that pilots would feel comfortable admitting that maybe they're seeing UFOs without feeling like a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracist. The videos in question include reports from the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences, released from 2017 to 2018. They feature long, oblong-shaped objects captured with infrared that appear in the Earth's atmosphere before rapidly disappearing from view. Now, really interestingly here is these aren't the only pill-shaped cylindrical UFOs that have been spotted recently. There were 2 videos from 2015 that came out, and before that there was a Navy case involving these in 2004, and even on the rest of this list you'll see a cylindrical cigar-shaped UFO in a sighting from the 40s. So this sort of thing does happen a lot. Now, the purpose of the Navy investigating all this stuff, it's more focused on safety hazard and threats of national security, but hey, at the same time, they may not be willing to talk about it so brazenly, but they definitely are checking just a little bit to make sure they are aliens. But they definitely know more than they're letting on. This footage released only makes up a tiny fraction of what the US Navy and other service branches encounter. One pilot, Lieutenant Graves, claims that in his 10 years flying for the Navy, he thinks he's probably encountered, I don't know, thousands of UFOs in his time. Those are his words. Now, who is to say how many of those might just actually be unidentified flying objects, birds, scouts, drones, whatever, but who's to say how many of them really were alien craft from outside the planet? Number 4, Childs Whitted case. The Childs Whitted encounter is one of the most recognized UFO encounters in American history for how surprisingly credible it seems. It happened shortly after the Roswell incident, when UFO fever was hot on everybody's minds in the States, and it was showing. The sighting occurred in the morning hours of one July 24th, 1948. The 2 pilots, one Clarence Childs and John Whitted, were flying approximately 5,000 feet above Montgomery, Alabama on a clear, normal night. Flight was going well, nothing too exciting, but at around 2:45 in the morning, Childs saw something peculiar. He noticed a dull red glowing light above and ahead of the aircraft, and it wasn't even remotely near Christmas, so it wasn't Rudolph leading the sleigh. He told Whitted that it must be a new type of army jet that was flying in front of them that neither of them had ever seen. They wanted to get a better look at it, and in a matter of seconds, well, they would. When the object flew past the right side of their plane and pulled up with a tremendous burst of flame protruding from its rear, and it zoomed upwards and onwards into the clouds. The 2 pilots described the object looking like a flying cigar with a cylindrical chassis and 2 decks and windows. Besides the 2 pilots, one passenger on the flight, one C.L. McKelvey, insisted that during his flight he saw a bright streak of red flashing lights by one of his windows. Now, Childs and Whitted were obviously pretty darn confused by whatever it was they'd saw. Didn't look like no plane they'd seen before, and the way it moved seemed technologically more advanced than anything the US Army was putting out in the late 40s. Now, the US Army proper would challenge this account, and their scientists insisted. They investigated the report and said that it was probably just a meteor the pilots and passengers had seen, which almost sounds like it might make sense until you stop and think about it for a second, because what meteor has windows and a glowing red light coming from it and propels itself forward and rapidly goes upward? Most meteors I've ever heard of go downwards. And Childs and Whitted both disagreed with this as well, saying they got a good long look at it and it wasn't a meteor. Whatever it truly was, though, might be lost to history, tragically. Number 3, the Gander, Newfoundland encounter. Our next story comes to us from Gander, Newfoundland, and it happened on February 10, 1951. A U.S. Naval Reserve lieutenant and pilot Graham Bethune was occupying the captain's seat of a plane flying near Newfoundland, Canada, when he spotted something unusual, massive, and rapidly approaching towards the plane. It resembled a disc. The co-pilot made a report of what he saw, and this is what he wrote. Take a listen. "I observed a glow of light below the horizon about 1,000 to 1,500 feet above the water. The pilot and I observed its course and motion for about 4 or 5 minutes before calling it to the attention of the other crew members. Suddenly, the object changed direction at an incredible speed and began to pulsate, changing its colors as well. Then, it somehow reversed its course and tripled its speed until at last it disappeared over the horizon." The report would go on to say that whatever this object was, it came within 5 miles of the aircraft, which was proven later by radar evidence. Now, when the plane had landed, the entire crew was detained by intelligence officers and interrogated. At their destination, pilot and passengers were questioned again by naval intelligence and required to sign full disclosure documents. Now, take this next part with a grain of salt. okay? Because I only found one source on this. But apparently a CIA scientist confidentially interviewed the pilot, and during their interrogation, he showed him a photo of a disc-like object that looked extremely similar to the one they had seen flying over the Atlantic. However, during the interviews, no Navy, Air Force, or CIA men would ever answer any questions related to extraterrestrials. No one would say the word alien, no one was saying UFO, nothing like that. They were trying very hard to downplay that. So what was it then? Because it sounds incredibly suspicious that the interviewers had a photo of something that looked similar to it and weren't saying the word alien at all. Number 2. November 1986 Japanese Airlines flight. Our next one comes to us from a pair of Japanese pilots. In November 1986, Japanese Airlines Flight 1628 was heading over Alaska. Captain Kenju Terauchi and a crew of 2 others were on a flight making routine cargo deliveries to France. Captain Terauchi saw something that caught his attention when he saw blinding lights flashing off at the left and the right of the plane. Now, initially he didn't think too much of it. He thought, hey, maybe these are just US fighter jets zipping around. As his plane furthered forward, he realized that the object was flying ahead of him was of the unidentified variety, a UFO, if you will. Terauchi said that it looked like 2 spaceships had stopped in front of their faces, shooting off lights. The inside cockpit shined brightly, and I felt warm in the face, he wrote. That almost sounds kind of pleasant, to be honest. Captain Terauchi described the objects as being cuboid-shaped spaceships with a jet propulsion system that had horizontal lines of circular exhausts clustered around a dark center. The captain had also reported that when the plane had flown by this object, ground communications were cut out and all radar was blocked. Well, that's kind of odd, isn't it? Pretty interesting. Well, if you thought that was weird, the FAA would agree with it. That's the Federal Aviation Administration, who investigated the report very closely, interrogating Terauchi for everything they could out of the incident. Now, during this questioning, his co-pilot and flight engineer, they said that they thought the object they saw was just strange lights, but they did agree that they really couldn't easily explain what it was they saw. In the end, the FAA ruled that what it was light refraction through ice crystals suspended in clouds. A bunch of science words. Sure. Number 1. Lieutenant Gorman. Our number 1 spot on this list is a humdinger of a tale. Now, most of us can only hope to maybe someday see a UFO in our lives, but I mean, maybe if you were like me and you watched Star Wars way too many times and you still ask the hairdressers to get your hair cut like Luke Skywalker, not like anybody I know. Maybe you dream of flying an X-Wing through the stars, dodging lasers, getting into a cool alien dogfight. It's a shame none of us can claim we've done that, except, you know, George Gorman of the North Dakota National Guard. I don't think anyone would expect there to be anything exciting happening in North Dakota, but one of the best UFO encounters in American history did. Let's take a little listen and learn about it. It was 1948, a year after the New Mexico Roswell incident, while people were still hyper-focused on little gray men and flying saucers. Lieutenant Gorman was flying a fighter jet solo around the skies above Fargo when he saw what he thought was an aircraft around 500 feet below him. He radioed his tower, but the operator told him that there weren't any other planes to be around and that it was a suspicious vehicle. So Gorman told the tower back he was going to investigate the situation and flew in within 1,000 yards to try and positively ID the subject. Gorman said it looked to be about 6 to 8 inches, clear white and completely round without fuzz at the edges, and it was blinking on and off. As I approached, the light suddenly became steady and pulled into a sharp left bank. I thought it was making a pass at the tower. Gorman then said he thought the light charged at him. He didn't want to be the first pilot to crash into a UFO, so he readied himself to avoid it, but found the object suddenly shot straight upwards in the air, directly above him, and then disappearing into the clouds. Gorman tried his best to pull up to follow along, but his plane went into a stall while he was trailing it, and the entity had vanished. Back at the air tower, 2 traffic controllers reported they also saw a light flying above the airstrip they couldn't explain, and weren't present on any flight logs. Gorman was questioned about what he saw, and he said he was convinced that it wasn't just a light, that it moved too naturally, that it moved like it was reacting to his movements, as if it was playing a game with him. He said there was thought and precision behind all its maneuvers. We should ask it what it thought about all of that if Gorman was moving too naturally, reacting to all of that. In the age of the internet, we're skeptical of any footage we see. You should be. But what about the footage we don't? Number 5. The Roswell Autopsy. Perhaps one of the most famous pieces of lost alien footage is the infamous Roswell Autopsy tape. Maybe you've heard of it. If you're a UFO enthusiast like me, no doubt it's come up before at some point. Roswell was kind of the birthplace of UFO mania, where a lot of the first conspiracy theories and a lot of the public ideas we have about aliens really stem from. If you don't know somehow, the story goes that an alien craft crash landed in Roswell, New Mexico, where it was swiftly apprehended apprehended by shadowy government agents looking to pull a curtain over the whole thing. Reverse engineered, studied, down to the pilot of the craft, recovered by FBI scientists. Almost immediately after, hushed whispers and rumors of a recorded alien autopsy set conspiracists and enthusiasts' mind ablaze in equal measures. Recorded footage of an alien body being dissected would be undeniable proof with world-shattering consequences, and would probably make for some pretty good ratings. Well, the Fox network would agree with you, because in 1995, the footage was broadcasted on Fox, presented by legendary thespian and #1 guy to trust in regards to human-alien relations, one Jonathan Frakes. The film broadcast was not the true footage of the autopsy, but rather a high-budget recreation to show for a wider public audience what had happened. The director claims he had seen the original footage from the 1947 autopsy, but couldn't release it. He claims that he spliced shots from the original footage into the faked footage to provide some clarity, but didn't tell us what was real and what wasn't. And he insists that the video wasn't faked, but rather a reconstruction for educational purposes. Now, despite only being a reenactment, the special effects of the footage are remarkable. It does look pretty believable. It was helmed by industry legend Stan Winston, the special effects warlock responsible for bringing the Predator and the aliens alike. The alien body in the footage was filled with sheep guts, chicken entrails, pig knuckles, and raspberry jam to create the illusion of an alien filled to bursting with foreign organs, and probably tasted halfway decent with a little bit of soy sauce. So was the footage ever actually real, or was it all just cooked up to sweep up viewers on a dwindling TV season? The director maintains always that what he saw was real, he just wasn't allowed to show it, and did his best to show us what happened. There's an interesting discussion to be had there, I think. Was he just showing how easy it is to fraud something, manipulate people into believing whatever they see? Who's to say if the true footage ever did come out, we would even believe it? We would probably just dismiss it the exact same way. #4. Edgar Mitchell. The thing about most alien sightings is that they don't always come from the most reputable of sources. You know, it's usually a random internet post, maybe a blurry shot from an iPhone kind of thing, posted on Reddit with a caption like, "What is this?" Or, you know, it's somebody who's walking home late at night and saw some lights in the sky and didn't know it was a plane. And while I think we should respect the voice of the people and the common man, it'd be nice if we got someone with a little bit of clout to their name. Well, luckily we've got more than a few astronauts who've seen bizarre things up there and are willing to share their stories. Edgar Mitchell is one such man. He's stood on the face of the moon before, he helped save the Apollo 14 mission from becoming a disaster, he's the 6th man to ever walk on the moon, and he is a lifelong defender and believer in aliens and UFOs. Mitchell claims that he's seen things that prove existence of life outside the planet. First and foremost, he is a firm believer of the Roswell conspiracy, and he insists that all those stories are true and that the military has been hiding the truth behind what happened at Roswell for decades, adding on to say that it was buried, and the military propagated a covert movement to discredit everything that had happened at Roswell, to deter people from taking any news about UFOs and flying saucers seriously, dismissing it forever as tinfoil hat stuff. Mitchell claims that NASA believes the public wouldn't be able to handle the truth. Come on, we're ready. We're ready, we're all ready, we're big enough now to know the truth. It's like the tooth fairy, we're grown up, we know where the quarters are coming from, just tell us. And Edgar Mitchell's been trying to just tell us. In 2004, Edgar Mitchell told a Floridan newspaper that he knew there was a secret cabal inside the American government that took in and studied alien corpses, and that after JFK was removed from office, the group did not answer to the president and didn't include the commander-in-chief in their briefings. He was quoted saying, "They all know that UFOs are real. The question is where they are coming from." A shadowy organization existing outside the president's control with insider knowledge on aliens and trying to suppress the public. Did Mr. Mitchell just casually confirm the Men in Black are real? Now, NASA themselves obviously denied all of Mitchell's statements, but obviously they would. What government is going to throw their hands up and admit that they have been slicing up alien bodies on the side? #3. The first flying saucer. Now, while the Roswell, New Mexico incident was the UFO sighting that really shot alien sightings into the mainstream public consciousness and kind of defined what alien sightings look like, you know, the idea of little gray or green men and flying saucers, it was obviously far from the first alien sighting ever recorded, just kind of the most popular. But not even a few weeks earlier, there was actually another famous sighting, and one that's thought to be the progenitor for sightings of UFOs being thought of as flying saucers. Kenneth Arnold was an American aviator. Unlike most UFO sightings, Kenneth never changed his story once, never made any kind of surrealist, outrageous claims, and stuck to the same story for the rest of his life. He saw weird saucers in the air he couldn't explain. Well, Let's take a listen. It was 1947, June the 24th, weeks before Roswell, which occurred in July 1947. Mr. Arnold was flying his private plane over Washington by Mount Rainier. I've never been to Washington, so you guys gotta forgive me. He was looking for a recently downed transport plane that had a $5,000 bounty the US military was offering in exchange for its finding. As he was approaching the summit, Arnold noticed that he saw 9 blinding flashes of light hovering up above. When looking in closer, they resembled ships but looked like discs. Arnold said that he saw them flying in a bizarre pattern, with each position diagonally together, reporting that it reminded him of the tail of a kite. Arnold was an aviation expert and said that the craft seemed far more advanced than anything human beings were capable of at the time, moving at unbelievable speeds. He landed at a nearby airport and told crew that he saw something bizarre he couldn't rationalize, worried that perhaps it could have been missiles being fired at Washington. Reporters interviewed him and he was pressed for several questions, but no one could corroborate or figure out just exactly what it was he had seen. Arnold was questioned by the Army as well, who took his claims remarkably seriously, as he was a fairly respected and reputable man, and there wasn't really the same culture surrounding aliens and UFOs, and as such, his claim was met with genuine worry. No one ever figured it out, but the story of them being saucers, combined with the saucers seen in New Mexico, led to the public perception of UFOs picturing them as saucers for the better part of 60 years, pretty much to this day. Number 2, the Travis Walton abduction. Now, abduction stories can sometimes be a little much to believe, even for those with the most open minds who want to believe. You know, they all seem kind of the same. It's somebody you maybe can't trust driving home late at night, saw something strange, they woke up in a blinding light room, and they got poked and prodded by little gray men. Well, Travis Walton's story is not dissimilar to that. It's pretty out there even by abduction standards, but it's too juicy to pass up, so pop open those ears. In 1975, Travis Walton was working as a logger and was facing a fairly routine day, 6 other loggers and him driving around in the forest, when they saw something incredibly bright shining at them through the treetops. One of the men claimed it looked like a flattened disc, a saucer of sorts even. Walton stepped out of the bed of the truck to investigate and was struck by some invisible force that knocked him backwards. The rest of the crew panicked and drove away. Huge faux pas, I'll say, leaving your coworker behind after being struck by an alien, but okay, you think you know somebody. When the crew returned, Walton had vanished. Walton awoke and had thought that he'd been taken to a hospital because he'd found himself in a blindingly bright room and could hear people moving around him. But it wasn't until he got a good look at his doctors that he knew something was amiss. 3 feet tall, with brown, quarter-sized pupils, with marshmallow-like skin. Walton freaked out, obviously, as one would probably do, and was swiftly restrained by his captors. He tried to fight them off, but was greeted by a tall creature he said resembled a humanoid, but was masked by an intimidating helmet, a kind of Darth Vader looking thing. The masked creature took Walton and escorted him back into the operating room and put a translucent mask over his face. And Walton drifted out of consciousness again, unsure if anything was real. The next thing he remembers is walking alongside a highway as if nothing had ever happened. He eventually finds his way to a phone and called his brother-in-law, who panically asked what had happened. It turned out that Walton had been gone for 5 days, and he was untraceable. Search parties had formed looking for him, sent dogs and choppers tracked him from the woods, but no one could find any sign of him, as if he'd blinked out of existence and then blinked right back. Travis swore what happened to him was real, a real abduction, and he's maintained that story ever since that fateful week in 1975. Now, if you think this story is fascinating and you're upset that nobody recorded any of it and there wasn't any footage of what Travis described, well, the tragic news is, yeah, it doesn't exist. You can, however, watch a 90s sci-fi movie that is directly based off Travis's case called Fire in the Sky. I've never seen it, but I'm sure it's on Amazon Prime or something. It's got Robert Patrick from Terminator 2. He's in it. He's a good actor. Yeah, check it out. And number 1, the Rendlesham Forest incident. The incident and conspiracy at Roswell, New Mexico is one of the most famous events in UFO culture. This incident is considered England's Roswell, the Rendlesham Forest incident. Few other alien sightings can boast this many government witnesses, memos, and strange proof. Let's paint the scene. It was December 26, 1980. Oh, nice and festive and Christmas themed. Surrounding Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, England was a series of Air Force bases and US Army personnel. 2 of these stationed officers were John Burroughs and Jim Peniston. On this fateful night, the 2 of them were concerned by shining bright lights that were seen flying above the base, worrying that it could perhaps have been a threat or a spy plane scouting out their location. Burroughs said that he thought the lights looked like a beacon summoning people over, and over 40 people on the base all agreed, reporting seeing the lights and sharing their concerns. So the 2 men were sent over to Rendlesham Forest to investigate. In their official document, the 2 men claimed that they had seen a strange, shining, triangular object that was pulsing with colored lights. Neither of the men recognized it as an aircraft from any military across the globe. The craft had seemed far too advanced for anything of this world. Black and made out of a smooth, opaque glass. It didn't appear to have any wings or landing gear or even really any methods of propulsion or exhaust. The men describe it as covered in hieroglyphic-like symbols etched onto the hull of the vessel all over. Neither of the men could identify the glyphs as anything they'd seen before. Duh, it's alien stuff. As the craft touched down, nearby animals were being driven into a frenzy, and the airmen's equipment started malfunctioning, communications equipment cutting out. The two personnel could no longer call back to the base. Now, not even 2 days later, the Rendlesham UFO was spotted again. 2 days later, the same strange lights were seen hovering above the bases surrounding Rendlesham. This time, the crews came significantly more prepared, waiting and ready for the UFO to make contact. The patrol group had found depressions in the ground, and their Geiger counters started blowing up with noise. And the group had known that they'd come across where the UFO had been, and then, right on time, the patrol saw the same craft flying above overhead, disappearing into the night. Years passed, and we're still no closer to understanding just what occurred with those faithful sightings. And we may never know.
Ever since the dawn of time, man has looked to the stars and wondered if we are alone. Number 5. A sighting from Colorado. When flying over Colorado, one could expect to see tall mountains, vivid landscapes, beautiful, lush forests, and clear running rivers, all of which are things I miss while being trapped in this void. Something that you might not expect to see when looking out your airplane window is an unidentified flying object carrying visitors from another world. But just because something is unexpected doesn't mean it can't happen. As an airline pilot named Jeremy Corbell found out earlier this year. Earlier this year, Jeremy Corbell was flying over Colorado when he saw something he didn't expect. At first, it appeared to be a shooting star, but this theory was thrown out when it appeared to split into 3 pieces, which then went into a triangle formation. The veteran pilot was so shocked at this that he pulled out his phone and filmed the phenomena. While passing aircraft can often be mistaken for alien ships by people who don't know any better, the fact that this was reported by a pilot who would know if it was simply another plane is very interesting. Multiple theories were put forward, including that the lights were high-altitude reconnaissance drones, but the level of light given off by them disqualified this theory. The pilot described the lights as being unlike anything he had ever seen in his entire career of flying. Over the last few decades, many commercial pilots have apparently seen unusual craft sharing the skies with them, but have been prevented from reporting the incidents by airline companies they work for. Are the airlines worried about their pilots seeming crazy? Or are they worried passengers will be afraid of flying if they know they aren't the only ones up there? Number 4. A sighting from the southeast United Kingdom. You would think that an entire country who have been obsessed with the tales of an extraterrestrial who travels through space and time in a blue police box while kidnapping their citizens to act as his acolytes for the last 60 years wouldn't be too shocked when confronted with evidence that aliens from other planets really exist. But it would seem that no matter how much fiction one consumes, it can still be shocking when confronted with the real thing. As a security guard in England found out in our next entry. When checking CCTV footage from your work, you may be expecting to see animals or even some light crime. But in July 2022, a man in the United Kingdom saw something far stranger. Visitors from another world. On the screen, he saw a large glowing sphere suddenly appear above a nearby power station complex. It hovered above the station and then just as suddenly disappeared. At first, the man thought it was a flare, but there was no trail showing where it could have been shot from. He continued to look for a rational explanation, checking flight radar to make sure it wasn't a plane or a drone. He went outside to see it with his own eyes, but nothing was visible to the naked eye. He brushed it off until a few days later when a coworker came in claiming to have seen the same light hovering and then disappearing over a nearby field. The workers went back through their CCTV footage and posted the footage online. What exactly did they see in the sky? And where did it go when it disappeared in the blink of an eye? These workers will likely never know and will instead carry these questions around in their heads until the day they die. Number 3. A sighting in Las Vegas, Nevada. Las Vegas is a city that would sound like a city in a science fiction novel if we didn't know for a fact it is real. A city where vice and debauchery are encouraged, with claims that no consequences will be remembered remembered once you leave its borders. A flashy city of neon, constructed in the middle of a barren desert. Considering how ridiculous that sounds, and Nevada's already considerable reputation for alleged alien activity, perhaps we should not be surprised that visitors from another world would want to take a look for themselves. Proving that what happens in Vegas does not always stay in Vegas, we have our next entry. A man and his friend were driving home at night when they saw unusual activity in the sky. Two large white orbs of light were floating in the sky. As if this were not shocking enough for the witnesses, smaller red orbs began to appear as if coming from the larger craft. These red lights would fly off on their own, sometimes returning to the larger white orbs. The witnesses claimed that over 25 of these red orbs came out of the craft and flew around, which begs the question. Did they see an alien craft or something else? If it was an alien craft, what was the purpose of these smaller red lights? Were they searching for something? And if they were, did they find it? Was this something sinister or simply an interstellar game of hungry hippos? More importantly, why am I asking you? The glowing white orbs reportedly stayed in place for over 5 hours before eventually disappearing into the night. Number 2. A sighting in Sacramento. For those who are more skeptical, it is understandable that you would not be impressed by a lot of footage that is released of alleged alien encounters. It is often grainy, shaky footage that looks like it was filmed on a potato rather than a camera. And oftentimes, one is right to be skeptical. Oftentimes, things can be mistaken for alien crafts when seen through the lens of a phone camera late at night in the dark. But sometimes, people witness the unexplainable in broad daylight. Such is the case in our next entry from Sacramento, California. In this case, a man was in his yard with his family when he looked to the sky and saw a cone-shaped object flying through the sky. They pointed it out to their parents, who were also in the yard, and all of them did their best to capture footage of the cone-shaped craft. It seemed to morph in shape between a cone and an elliptical shape, but when they zoomed in, they saw that the bottom of the cone was emitting light. It is clearly not a plane, and the light coming out of the bottom is curious to say the least. Number 1. A sighting in Canton, Ohio. When working a full-time job, having the opportunity to relax on your day off with a cold drink in the company of your loved ones is something you look forward to all week. While imagining how you will spend your leisure time, you may imagine a variety of experiences like land darts or barbecuing for your friends and neighbors. Rarely do people imagine that they will be spending their time off witnessing an interaction between the military and an unidentified flying object, as is the case in our next entry. On the 10th of November, a man was sitting on his back porch enjoying a well-earned day off when he heard the sound of a military helicopter. The helicopter appeared to be chasing after something. He looked around and saw several small, white glowing shapes moving at high speed away from the helicopter. He grabbed his phone to record what he was seeing, but several of the shapes disappeared before he could record. However, some of them remained, and he was able to capture them on film. While this is impressive footage, the most disturbing part of the story for me is the helicopter chasing them. Were they trying to research the UFO? Or were they attacking them or chasing them away? Whatever it was, let's hope that it didn't result in any tensions between humanity and an advanced alien race.
Number 5. Mars. The goal of the Mars exploration program is, quote, to explore Mars and to provide a continuous flow of scientific information and discovery through a carefully selected series of robot orbiters, landers, and mobile laboratories interconnected by a high bandwidth Mars-Earth communications network. Okay, yeah, that's great and all, but like, are you selecting which pictures you share with us? Cause we'd love to see what the planet looks like. In 4K, please. I know I would. I think it's funny that we can see an infrared cloud into the vast distances of space with the new Webb telescope, yet 4K pictures, still none of the other side of the moon. Huh, that's weird. I mean, it's a lot closer if we wanted to start there, you know? But Mars is great too. We've all seen the pictures of right angles and impossibly formed canyons and craters from Perseverance to get an idea of what exactly the red planet looks like. Yeah, it's red. And sandy, like PEI sand. But we're starting to see some weirder and weirder stuff from NASA as it collects scientific information up there. Like, say, this potential crash landing site. I mean, if it was a crater, bigger hole. If it was an asteroid, bigger hole. Nope, just this thing that looks exactly like what it'd look like if you whipped a rock into sand. Just kinda skips and you know? This would happen. Buzz Lightyear to Star Command, we've crash-landed on a strange planet. I don't know, I'm not saying this stuff's covered up or anything, but like, I feel like if we have the equivalent of a bad garage door security camera, you know? Doing like a long 345-degree shots and only showing us more sand. This thing could be in the Gobi Desert for all we know, we'd never know the difference. Show us the bases, where's the monoliths? Also, one lens? One lens? Like, where's the X-ray, the infrared, radio waves? Let's go, people. We've all played No Man's Sky. Where's the 4K and the jetpacks, dude? Number 4, Paul Hellyer. Okay, now on to some more scary stuff. Hey, also, if you dig the channel, make sure you like and subscribe, or comment down below. Do you think they're releasing this late report to Congress or what? Just kinda hoping everyone forgets it's due and just moves on? Anyway. Flying on up to Canada, who's been involved in UFOs for a very, very long time. The RAF and RCMP have been on top of this stuff. I'd say even before the Americans. Paul Theodore Hellyer, August 1923 to August 2021. First off, rest in paradise, sir. This man has done more for us up north than we'll ever know. This man has and will play a huge role in the UAP phenomenon as a whole. I encourage you all to look into Paul here a little bit deeper. An engineer, a politician, writer, commentator. He was the longest serving member of the Queen's Privy Council for Canada. In 1967, Hellyer inaugurated a UAP landing site in St. Paul, Alberta. The town built it as a Canadian Centennial Celebration project, as a symbol of keeping space free from human warfare. In 2005, Hellyer made headlines by publicly announcing that he was a true believer in the existence and was an invited speaker at the conference in Toronto where he shared that he had seen a UFO during his career. In 2007, Paul was demanding world governments to disclose alien tech that could be used to solve problems of climate change. Hey, that's pretty cool. In an interview in 2014, Hellyer said that at least 4 species of aliens have been visiting Earth for the last 1,000 years, with most of them passing by from another star system, and of course, those living with us on Earth from Venus, Mars, and Saturn's moons. Awesome. Just for some credentials here, Paul ran for the federal election like 12 times. Yeah, Air Force, Navy, former Minister of National Defense. Guy was 98, people. Do some homework. He's easily the highest ranked true tinfoil hatter we know of. 98 years that man graced our planet. I wonder what he knew. Number 3, government. Speaking of disclosure and how we're all kind of right in the middle of it, right now, we go to Congress. It's odd because we obviously joke and have a good time and make light of the whole situation, but like, whether you like it or not, it's happening. First off, I'm scared. I'll admit it, I'm scared. I scared my stuff into this stuff. I discovered John Greenwald in like the 9th grade and it's been rabbit holes ever since. Let me tell you. When Congress starts talking about other planets and aliens, it starts mocking up some public citizen hearings with ex-Congress members. It's starting to get a little scary. But these public hearings, they whip this bad boy out. The cream of the crop UFO video that they say they have. The portrait mode, the 4 seconds of a circular something. Like, that's it? Apparently it's taken from the cockpit of a US fighter jet. May 17th, 2022, members of the United States House Intelligence Subcommittee on Counterterrorism, Counterintelligence, and Counter-Proliferation held Congress hearings with top military officials to discuss the reports of UAPs. Did you miss it? Yeah, it was at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. Yeah, really important stuff. Also, how come they put like the grainy 90s filter on the video? Dude, like we make videos here, we're not gonna notice that? This thing's grainier than the first episode of The Golden Girls. The first public Congress hearing in over 50 years, and this is it. Again, there's some mock citizen hearings that were way more convincing and way more informative from way more reliable personnel. Also, better quality. Interesting, huh? But again, why wasn't all this shared when it originally happened? The government says, yeah, there's like 14 things we can't explain, yet try and solve the easy ones. Apparently there's like 144 more classified videos to just rummage through. It's been a big month, I will say that. 16 candidates for the new UAP NASA program, report late from Halloween, weather balloons, airborne clutter, foreign surveillance. What are they going to tell us this week? Number 2, Dave Foley. And we come to yet another great Canadian, Mr. Dave Foley. Those of you who aren't familiar with the North and what we produce up here, Dave is a Canadian actor, comedian, director, producer, and writer. He created Kids in the Hall, a Canadian gem, and also an avid believer in the phenomenon. He took to Twitter a couple months ago and caught the attention of many. Foley tweeted, quote, "After years of interest in the UFOs without ever seeing anything, I saw something. This is a drawing of what I saw. I was with a friend who I'll let decide if he wants to be attached to this. It moved silently, at great speed, hovered and pulsated with light. End quote. Now this ship does look a lot like what we've seen in the past reports, so who knows, Dave may actually have seen a UFO. Maybe these aliens are just fans of A Bug's Life. Guys flick, man. Maybe they just want an autograph, I know I would. He continues online, quote, "Many people who have encountered the phenomenon are afraid to discuss it because of the thoughtless and uninformed derision it inspires. Many who discuss it have had their lives ruined by that derision." I should point out, the white lights were on the front of the craft, assuming it was moving forward, and those lights pulsated separately from the body of the craft, which also pulsated. We felt like our emotions were being tamped down. We were unnaturally unresponsive to what we were seeing. In a way, I'm still experiencing that. End quote. Hey, it's all fun and games when the celebs get involved, isn't it? But up here, Canada's been involved for a long time. More publicly, too. Just last week, a report said that Canadians were briefed last year on what's what with the phenomenon. A document released a couple days ago say the February briefings were delivered by multiple members of the Pentagon UAP task force, and attending was 10 Canadian defense officials, including the Royal Canadian Air Force and military intelligence. Right? Like, not just comedians and sketches, you know? These people have been around a while and read some stuff. Paul Hellyer type stuff. And number 1, Tom DeLonge. Come on, this is an easy one. And probably the most confusing yet reliable source of them all? I know, trust me. Blink-182. Hey mom, there's something in the back room. Well, there actually could be. Remember enjoying their song Aliens Exist before believing that aliens actually exist? Yeah, the lyrics hit a bit different now, don't they? Cut to 2017, former Blink member Tom DeLonge, now the co-founder of To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science. Sounds fun, right? Until you see the panel. Military generals, astrophysicists, psychologists that have been studying this stuff since the 50s. It's the real deal. But how can a rock star be the head of this phenomenon? Well, he's into aliens, and that's an understatement. Susan Gao, the Pentagon spokesperson who made the public statements on disclosure, said that the Navy had confirmed that those 3 videos that are so wide in circulation are authentic recordings made by naval aviators. And guess who got all those out to us? Quote, "Everyone still looks to the United States government as having all the resources. We've been waiting around as scholars and researchers for many decades, hoping God that one day the government would come to us on what this is. This whole thing could be answered by the government. We're just waiting for them to come help us out with some of the research. This situation that happened is what we've been hoping it would do, so it can ignite more intellectuals to get into this race and help us figure out more about it." End quote. I couldn't agree with you more, Tom. Physicists, astronauts, that's who we want to hear from, you know? And just for dessert, here's what Tom posted on his Instagram. You tell me what's up.
Number 5, the Allagash abduction. Our first tale is known as the Allagash abduction. And by the way, what a turn of a phrase. That sounds like a great airplane book. Named after the Allagash waterway in Maine where it took place. In 1976, a group of 4 friends who'd all met in college were taking a trip camping, canoeing, and relaxing. The trip would be a trip they would never forget, and not just because of the salmon. The men, twin brothers Jack and Jim, and friends Chuck and Charlie, all decided to go out fishing on the lake at night. Before setting off, though, they made sure to light a large campfire to act as a visible landmark from the water. Now, the evening transpired fairly normally, you know, fishing, sharing stories, until the men saw a blinding light in the sky above them. A glowing orb that shone brighter than any light any of the men had ever seen, flashing all sorts of bright, radiant colors. Now, the object was hard to make out, but it looked to be about 80 meters in diameter, and was slowly approaching the fishing boat. The men hurriedly panicked and paddled back to the shoreline, only to discover that the campfire they had been lit had been completely smoldered and looked to have been put out hours and hours ago, despite the men having not been out nearly that long. Stranger still, a few days after the trip, the men all started reporting similar nightmares, seeing a silver operating room and long, tall, giant-headed creatures examining them in this room, taking samples of their blood, their skin, and so on. All of them described the room, the creatures, and the nightmares extremely similarly. The men underwent psychiatric evaluation and were all deemed mentally stable, even passing polygraph tests. So what happened? Could this have been a mass hallucination? Or were these men plucked by visitors from another world for study? Number 4, the mysterious man. Our next story comes to us from the internet's campfire, Reddit. A thread was posted asking abductees, or people who've got an abduction story to share their experience. Now the whole thing is really a highlight, but this one stood out for me. Take a listen, because this anonymous Redditor shared a truly unforgettable, strange experience. He was living in Washington at the time, and he and his friends were really big stargazers. One Thanksgiving, he got invited to stay with his friend's family. So they all went out to go do some stargazing, went out to a big field of knee-high grass, and were staring up at what they thought was a bunch of shooting stars. The original poster asked his friend what the light was, but he said he had no idea. The light was bobbing around, bouncing wildly in the sky like a pinball. Then all of a sudden, it fizzled out. Puzzled, but not disturbed, the friends continued on with their night, walking through the field, wondering what they'd seen, even joking that maybe it was a UFO, but assuming it must have been a drone or something. And then it gets weird. They came across a young man standing alone in the field. They were the only people there for miles around, and the poster said he would have been able to see him from where he was. So he said it was almost as if he appeared in front of them. He was wearing only ratty jeans and nothing else. It was the middle of November, so the attire was particularly odd. Now the friends were scared to approach him, but OP felt necessary to go forward. He said he didn't sound drunk, but that he did seem visibly stirred. He asked the strange man what had happened, and he said he did not want to talk about it, but he needed to be examined at a hospital immediately. The Redditor gave the man his jacket and saw him into an ambulance, where he was then taken off to a hospital. What happened? Was this man an abductee who'd been dropped off? Was the light they saw flooding around him being beamed down? We may never know. Number 3. The 1979 Spain sighting. Another Reddit thread asking a similar question asked users to share their stories of famous UFO and alien sightings from their country, bringing us this story from Spain that took place in November 1979. A plane took off from Mallorca, coming from Austria and heading to Tenerife. Not long after, it found red lights in the sky hovering ahead of it. Now, initially the pilots assumed it was just another plane. The flight crew tried to signal over the radio to find out what was on their flight path. But neither the air traffic controller in Barcelona nor the military radar had any idea what it was they had encountered, as nothing else should have been sharing the airspace with them at this time. The plane ascended, hoping to avoid the flight path of the UFO, and to try and get a look to ascertain just what they were flying up with. The UFO kept getting closer and closer, so the pilots did an emergency landing in Valencia. The UFO had a similar idea and followed them around till it landed. The original plane's radar started to pick up 3 objects flying behind them. The military had sent out 2 planes to try and assess and contain the situation. They found a giant red light floating statically over the airport, even though it wasn't being picked up on by the radar. The light started to fly when they got closer as they attempted to chase it, soaring around, tailing the mysterious floating light for upwards of 2 hours, intermittently losing sight of the target completely, occasionally getting blips on the radar, until eventually the trail went cold, and as quickly as it had appeared, the strange light had disappeared. People on the ground reported seeing that light all over that day, and to date, no one truly knows what had happened. Number 2, the Travis Walton incident. Now our next story is a wild one even by top 5 standards, but that's exactly why I wanted to include it. Our story starts in November 1975, and I'm pretty sure that's the 3rd one of these that took place in November. It's a weird month for aliens, huh? Travis Walton was working as a forester, and the day was passing normally. Walton and his co-workers from the logging crew were riding in a truck, 7 men total, when they encountered a flying saucer-like object hovering above them around 100 feet in the air, making a loud, high-pitched droning noise. The truck stopped, and Walton left the vehicle to get a closer look at the unidentified flying object. And suddenly, a bright light surrounded the truck and knocked Walton back and unconscious. Terrified, the other men drove off. Walton then goes on to claim that when he awoke, he was no longer in the forest on the ground, but was in a bright, silvery, hospital-like room being observed by 3 short, bald creatures, very similar to the Allagash abduction story. He says that he struggled as much as he could against his captors until he was met with a tall creature that closely resembled a human, but was wearing an intimidating helmet. The masked creature escorted Walton to another room and put a translucent mask over his face, and he blacked out. Walton says the next thing he can accurately remember is walking alongside a highway 5 days later. The thing is, Walton really was missing for 5 days. There was a search. Scent dogs and helicopters were used to track him over the woods, and he was assumed to have passed. For 5 full days, he was completely untraceable until one day he just reappeared. Since that fateful week in 1975, Travis has sworn that what happened to him was an abduction, even if it just seemed like a bad dream. His story served as the basis for the 90s horror film Fire Fell from the Sky, so if you're looking for a dramatization of this story, good one to check out. And number 1, the Rendlesham Incident. It's sometimes referred to as Great Britain's Roswell. The Rendlesham Incident is a very noticeable case in UFO sighting history. On December 26, 1980, there was a series of vivid, bright flashing lights flying over Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, England. 2 US Army personnel, John Burroughs and Jim Penniston, were stationed at local Air Force bases and were alerted by these strange lights, worrying that it could have been a threat. The younger of the 2 men, Mr. Burroughs, said that the lights looked like a beacon flashing all sorts of colors. Over 40 personnel stationed at the Air Force base corroborated this claim. The 2 men got clearance to investigate whatever was flashing over Rendlesham Forest. In their official document to their superiors, the 2 men write that they saw a strange, glowing, metallic triangular object hanging in the sky, pulsing with colored lights. Neither of the men had any idea what it was they were witnessing. The craft seemed far more advanced than anything either of them had ever seen, and seemed not of this world. As if that wasn't compelling evidence enough, neighboring farm animals were all in a frenzy as this thing was flying, and the airman's equipment started malfunctioning. The personnel could no longer use their radio to contact the base. Landing in the middle of the clearing in the forest was a craft unlike either of them had ever seen. It was black, triangular, and made out of smooth, opaque glass. No windows or landing gear. It didn't look like anything either of these trained servicemen had ever seen. Penniston describes there being hieroglyphic-like symbols etched onto the shell of the vessel, although they were far too cryptic for him to understand. The craft took off, changing the lives of those men together. And it wouldn't even be the last sighting of the Rendlesham UFO, because not even 2 days later, the same strange lights were seen flying overhead the forest again. This time, coming prepared, crews set out with Geiger counters to follow up on whatever was flying around them. The patrol found their way to the landing site Penniston and Burroughs had described and found several depressions in the ground, all setting off the Geiger counter for radioactivity. And lo and behold, above them was those same flashing lights that had been taunting them 2 nights before, disappearing into the skies. 40 years later, and we're still no closer to understanding what happened in the Rendlesham incident. Number 5. TikTok sighting. Our first entry on this list comes to us from a very reputable source, TikTok. TikTok user Drillabang, who posted this video recently online. The caption, "We caught them out there," is almost Mulder's catchphrase of "the truth is out there." Almost. And it seems like they are. The video shows a short clip of someone filming the sky and clouds, and passing through the clouds slowly is something. It's kind of hard to tell. It's an unidentified flying object. A small black being with what looks like tentacles protruding from it, like a little black jellyfish. The entity is moving slowly through the sky, with what looks like an electrical field following all around it. The being appears to be electrical, possibly a small mechanical drone. My first thought looking at one of these things is just how much this thing looks like the Sentinels from the Matrix. Could very well be evidence of the simulation leaking through. This clip is undeniably pretty odd. It's hard to make out just how big this flying entity is, although it does look a little bit small, but really it's hard to tell. Is it a spacecraft? Is it a living being but biomechanical? Is it a drone? Of course, it has to be said, the clip, as impressive as it is, could very well be a high production hoax. Like I said, the thing really does look a little too perfect for me, and it looks a lot like one of those Matrix Sentinels. I honestly wouldn't even be surprised if it's a shrunken down 3D model of it used for the video. But real or fake, you can't deny that the video is captivating and has people talking. Number 4. Chilean UFO. Our next entry was posted to Reddit on r/aliens. I mean, where else are you gonna find alien clips? The video posted is filmed from a mountain in Chile, where a group of friends on a hike found something amazing in the sky, and luckily had their phones on them to record it. This entity floating around them doesn't really look like your traditional UFO sightings. It looks like a ball of pure energy just hovering above them in a triangular shape, looking like distilled pure light or just some photons or something. Looking around in the background, you can see there's nothing around them. No airports, no mysterious army bases nearby, just a big mountain range and a bizarre glowing ball of light hovering around aimlessly. A user on Reddit offered a rudimentary translation of the friends talking, which adds a little bit of insight to the clip. We can hear the friends joking that it could be a spirit bomb from Goku and there's going to be an epic duel soon. Goku is technically an alien, so I guess if Goku was real and you saw him flying around in the Nimbus cloud, that would qualify qualify for a UFO sighting. They go on to joke that it looks like something out of the movie Independence Day. It's really hard to say just what this thing is. Now, usually I tend to roll a little bit more Scully than Mulder, and I'm naturally a bit skeptic, but I am completely out of ideas looking at this thing. The edges of the triangle are so very visible, and it doesn't really seem like it follows any one particular flight pattern. I can't take even the slightest guess what this might be, so your guess is just as good as mine, my ghouls and goblins. Take a look for yourself, and decide for yourself what the answer is. Number 3, the Ring of Light. Another entry coming to us fresh from Reddit, posted by user Jesse Zell. A short clip that shows us something incredibly bizarre. The clip is captioned appropriately, "The most unexplained thing I have ever seen in my life," and I'm strongly inclined to agree. Take a little look-see. In the clip, we get a pretty good shot at a suburban house and the overcast night sky above. A little bit above the house, there appears to be a ring of light that appears, circling around, appearing a few lights at a time, rounding the house a few times. That's bizarre. Even the skeptics should buy into this one. I mean, it's easy to just imagine a flying saucer hovering a little bit out of view atop the clouds, descending its undercarriage lights on the neighborhood. A user in the comments proposed that it could just be nothing more than a series of spotlights. But the original poster and uploader of the video insists that from where they were standing, the lights are appearing above the clouds, not below them. And even then, what explains the perfectly circular pattern displayed? The user goes on to say that there was no particularly loud noises emanating from around the skies, and it was very hard to make out what was happening. They go on to add that they're very familiar with drones and have drones flying around their home with some regularity. I'm hoping they mean just a neighbor or an enthusiast and not that they're being watched. And that they would recognize a drone if there was one, and that they are certain these lights were not caused by drones. So just what is causing it? What was it? Is this Reddit user being observed by someone from the stars? Are they potentially a target for an abduction? We eagerly await a follow-up on this one. Number 2, the cube. Posted to YouTube by user, well, fittingly named, Is This a UFO? This brief 20-second clip showcases a pilot filming from inside the cockpit. Also, side note before I start talking about all the alien stuff, is that safe? Are you allowed to be doing that? I guess the plane doesn't crash in the video, so I'll take their word for it. Anyway, the clip is really short and sweet. We see from the window that there's a small cuboid-like shape blasting through the sky. The footage is extremely clear, unlike most UFO footage, and it's really easy to see what's happening, although it doesn't help matters much or provide you with any clear answers. What we can see is a small black cube propelling itself forward. There's no trail of smoke, no lights flashing, just a small black cube flying around. So what is that? Some comments in the video suggest that it could be a weather balloon or a helium balloon, although I gotta say the altitude is a bit questionable, or why it's traveling horizontally so fast. Its travel in the video does seem a bit pointed and intentional, like it's trying to get somewhere, although that could just be me wanting to apply sentient traits for it because I badly want to believe. Interestingly though, in 2014, a report from a 10-year Navy pilot veteran, Lieutenant Ryan Graves, claims that in his service, he would see UFOs nigh daily and would report them constantly, only to have his reports ignored. Interesting. He said in his time in the service, he'd see unexplainable objects flying by him at hypersonic speeds with no trails, no exhaust, often 30,000 feet up in the air undetected by his radar. He said one of the more consistent things that he would see was an object that looked like a sphere encased in a cube. Kinda sounds a bit like the cube propelling itself forward in this clip, doesn't it? Fascinatingly, after this report from Graves, the Navy announced it would be changing the way it handled UFO reports internally. Perhaps there's something they know and they're not telling us. Number 1, the laser pointer. And finally, we're down to our number 1 clip. Now this is my favorite clip of the bunch, by far. I mean, I would hope so, otherwise why would I bother putting it at the number 1 spot? This clip also comes to us from Reddit from user Luke511, filming above him what appears to be a ball of light bouncing around bizarrely in the sky. A UFO if I've ever seen one. Luke, who when faced with the dangers of the unknown, the wonders of the cosmos, possibly standing on a chance to make that fabled first contact with another civilization with unknown frontiers, stood proudly and takes a laser pointer out and starts flashing it upwards to the sky. Now I have nothing but respect for this absolute madman who got right down to brass tacks. Because him flashing that laser pointer made this video go from, maybe that's a UFO, to, oh, that is definitely a spacecraft being piloted by an intelligent being. In the video, as soon as you see him flashing it around, the vehicle maneuvers on a dime, trying clearly to avoid the laser, which is pretty damning. Now the reason I love this clip so much, besides the fact that I do think it's pretty concrete evidence, assume these really are aliens flying around in that spacecraft. Imagine you're coming down to a new planet and you see a green beam coming from the ground pointing directly at you. Do you think they were freaking out? Do you think they were losing their minds, panicking that they got made? That laser was gonna come for them and destroy them? Or do you think it was more like a kitten situation? Like they saw the laser and got distracted by a really enticing game of intergalactic chase? Luke 511, this has gotta be a top moment for humanity and for you as a whole. Tagging a UFO with a laser beam and potentially scaring alien life has got to be a landmark moment for us as a species. My only concern is that maybe this event might have sent intergalactic relations back just a little bit. I'm hoping aliens aren't afraid to visit the planet now because of the danger of green lights. We'll turn them off, we promise. We're sorry, it was just a little prank.
Number 5. Leland Melvin. American engineer and now retired NASA astronaut Leland Melvin has spent hundreds of hours in space. Literally hundreds. Leland holds 4 honorary doctorates for his service in education, the sciences, and philanthropy. Doctorates. I'm just saying that before the comments start rolling in saying he's just another wacko. He's crazy. They're not wackos, people. Any of them. They've been screened so many times by so many people with so many tests, they have to be damn well near perfect before going up on or in NASA's budget. Before his career with NASA, Leland was actually All-American for football. Detroit Lions, Toronto Argos. Guy made the NFL and then said, you know what? I think I'm gonna be an astronaut. Like, give this guy a Netflix movie, would ya? He was selected by NASA in 1998 after getting injured with a football career. Guy goes from the turf to working at NASA Langley Center. This guy's put in time, both down here and up there. Mission after mission with NASA. He's got quite the practice at the whole floating around thing. When Leland was pressed about otherworldly visitors and his ideas about the cosmos, he said this when he was working up in orbit. He had seen something translucent, curved and organic looking when he was working with fellow astronaut Randy Bresnik. The pair of them, called down to NASA to ask what it could be. NASA's official response was, probably ice. Yeah, nice and specific there, Houston. Thank you for that. When has NASA ever said probably? Melvin dismissed this and figured it was NASA's explanation to just cover it up. Like, who's more qualified here? That's all I'm asking. When the most qualified people are like, yeah, I can't tell if that's frozen water or a full-on mothership, Houston. Either they shouldn't be up there at all, or we need some more Windex on those windows there, NASA. Huh? Number 4, Ivan Wagner. As always, if you dig what we do here at Top 5 Scary, make sure you hit that like button or comment down below. It really helps the channel out. Speaking of falling into a wormhole of conspiracy and who said what, astronaut Ivan Wagner, or I should say cosmonaut Ivan Wagner, since he's Russian by birth, and although he's bunking up with some roomies up there in the ISS, he was on the ISS as a first timer just back in 2020. Does NASA initiate rookies up there? Like pull pranks on the newbies? Like no gravity, just unbuckle you while you sleep, flow you out, you know? He and fellow Russian Anatoly Ivanishin were working up there alongside Chris Cassidy, the American commander of said expedition. When Wagner was orbiting the Earth, he might have captured some footage of UFOs, better known as UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. It's the jargon nowadays. The aurora lights behind Earth's beautiful curves was being recorded from the ISS when he saw a string of really weird lights moving in a really weird way. He labeled the video Space Guests. Wagner tweeted the vid, which apparently shows the aurora australis near Antarctica, and then all of a sudden this blob of organized lights just cruises on over the globe. Looks like a blob of like glitter just trucking across space. Like, what is that? Of course NASA didn't follow up. Like, what are they gonna say? Oh yeah, those are stars that move and blink, I think. I mean, no? Space junk. Yeah, space debris and swamps and things. Also, what a lame excuse. Space junk? Okay, so you're saying there's lots of litter up there, that's what you're saying? That's what just zipped over my house silently, defying gravity and lasered up my cow? Yeah, I don't think so, NASA. Number 3, Chris Hadfield. Retired Canadian astronaut, engineer, fighter pilot, and musician. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Hadfield flew 2 missions and also served as commander on the International Space Station. Before his career as an astronaut, he served in the Canadian Armed Forces for 25 years as an air commander fighter pilot. So he has the credentials to say the least. In 1992, Hadfield was accepted into the Canadian astronaut program. He first flew in space in 1995, and since then, he says he's seen tons of stuff up there just zipping around that even a man with all those credentials says he can't explain. Quote, I've seen countless things in the sky, but he has a pretty cool take on it. He doesn't keep it on the DL, he doesn't boast, and he doesn't panic. Seems like Chris has the mentality like, quote, to see something in the sky that you don't understand and then to immediately conclude it's intelligent life from another solar system is the height of foolishness and lack of logic. However, Chris seems to have a little dirt on Mars that maybe we all don't. He said, I think the fundamental question is that Mars was a lot like Earth 4 billion years ago, when life first formed. So if it happened here, did it happen there? It would be evident somewhere in the geologic records. All we need is one fossil for proof. He thinks there could be potentially alien life in the clouds of Venus, or on the distant moons of one of our gas giants. Researchers have suggested that there could be microbial life in the clouds of Venus because of the presence of ammonia, which on Earth is a key indicator of aquatic life. Aquatic life, eh? Atlanteans? Hadfield on the UAP phenomenon, quote, "We have 7 people living up there. We've been sending people to space since I was born. I spent half a year off planet looking everywhere. It makes no sense at all that intelligent life somewhere from not our solar system could cross interstellar space and just sneak around and only be caught on some strange video by fighter pilots. It just doesn't pass any basic sniff test or logic. It's fun, it's exciting, but if you use reason, the whole argument falls apart." End quote. Okay, Chris Hadfield, keep your secrets for now, you polite Canadian you. Wait till people start looking into Paul Hellyer, another very polite Canadian with some secrets of his own. Until then, you keep distracting us up there with that guitar, Chris. I see you, Jake Sully. Number 2, Michael Collins. NASA veteran and the very first driver up there, Mr. Michael Collins himself, served as command module pilot on the historic Apollo 11 mission in 1969. When Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin walked on the moon for the very first time, saying those very first famous lines we all know so well, Collins was back parking that thing up there. Mr. Collins stayed up there by himself in lunar orbit waiting for the safe return of his crewmates. I can't even stay in a basement with the lights off by myself. Imagine being up there just drifting in the currents of matter, like being in the middle of the ocean. Yeah, no way, dude. The astronaut retired from NASA in 1970 and spent his free time answering questions on Twitter. Apparently, he has gotten some really interesting buzz. Mr. Collins invited the interweb to chat, saying, quote, "Are we alone? Hashtag Ask Michael Collins." And boy oh boy, did he get some responses. Everything from wackos who like aliens to very, very high-ranked generals and pilots who are apparently also wackos who like aliens for talking about this. Collins, quote, "I used to think that NASA sent me to the wrong place, to the moon, because I think Mars is a much more interesting place," end quote. Collins has talked about it in the past about the possibility of alien life existing beyond Earth and doesn't shy away from discussing the topic in full. In 1999, for instance, he even argued on the topic of life developing in other parts of this infinite cosmos. So maybe it has then. He wrote in his book saying, quote, "I am alone now. Truly alone, and absolutely isolated from any known life. Although I may feel like I'm the same person, I also feel that I am different from other people. I have been places and done things you simply would not believe." Collins circled the moon once every 2 hours. What's scarier, walking on an unknown rock that apparently no one's ever visited, or flying all the way around it by yourself in the pitch black with no communications? Collins achieved the rank of Major General. He left NASA in 1970 to join the State Department and later became director of the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum in Washington. One of the most key players in this whole thing. Michael Collins sadly passed in 2021. Number 1, Buzz Aldrin. Of course, the poster child for the whole phenomenon itself, Mr. Edwin Eugene Aldrin Jr. American astronaut, engineer, fighter pilot with a doctorate of science in astronautics. This guy is overqualified, okay? 3 spacewalks in 1966, Gemini 12 mission in 1969, Apollo 11 mission. He and mission commander Neil Armstrong were the first 2 people to land on the moon. Quote, "There was something out there, close enough to be observed. What could it be?" According to Aldrin, on Apollo 11 to the moon, quote, "I observed a light out the window that appeared to be moving alongside us. What could that have been other than a spacecraft from another country or another world? It was either the rocket that had separated from us or the 4 panels that moved away when we extracted the lander, right?" After he returned from his missions, he was convinced he saw aliens while he was out there. Credentials aside, he took a lie detector test, people, which he passed with flying colors. In an interview with C-SPAN Buzz, he talked about the future potential of Earth's moon for humanity. He added a little extra info that might have gained the spark to go back, regarding a certain monolith on a moon. Quote, "Visit the moon Phobos of Mars. There's a monolith there, a very unusual structure on this little potato object that goes around Mars once in every 7 hours. When people find out about that, they're gonna say, who put that there? And you bet, Buzz, I'll be the first one to ask that."
Number 5 on this list is the Navy UFOs. This is one of the most famous alien or UFO encounters the humans have had in the last few decades. Reader's Digest says, when it comes to extraterrestrial life and making contact with those from outer space, everyone has an opinion. Some think it's all a hack, some are open to speculate, and others still are entirely taken with the tales and stories as old as time, cameras poised and tinfoil hats at the ready. UFOs have fascinated and confused us for years, as each new flying saucer or hovercraft sighting makes national news and splits us into two camps. While it's easy to debunk individual stories, it's way harder to argue with the US Department of Defense. In videos leaked back in 2007 and 2017, the Pentagon has aimed to clear up any misconceptions by the public on whether or not the footage that has been circulating was real. In the video, unidentified objects are seen spinning and hovering in the air and above the water, while two Navy pilots remark in shock and confusion over the two oblong disc-shaped objects. So you may be thinking, well, how did the government try to hide it if they were the ones that actually released it? Well, they did release it themselves, but we have to remember that that was only after the videos had been leaked. In 2007 and 2017, these videos had made their way to the public without the government's stamp of approval. So everyone was freaking out and speculating on what the heck this thing could be and why we hadn't heard anything about it. What the heck it is, I don't know, but why we hadn't heard about it is because the government had chosen not to tell us. The only reason that they inevitably released the videos is because they got their hand caught in the cookie jar. They were found out. They were exposed when these videos were leaked. At that point, they could either continue to vehemently deny something that was clearly pointing towards naval activity, or they could fess up and release it themselves in hopes of taking less public backlash. They opted to do the second one because, in their words, they wanted to clear up any misconceptions by the public. That, however, is code for we got caught and we think that releasing it now would be better for us in the long run. If it was up to them though, these never would have seen the light of day, which then makes you wonder how many other videos like this are out there that you and me, we just don't know about. Number 4 on this list is the O'Hare incident. Chicago's O'Hare International Airport had quite the interesting experience back in 2006. Reader's Digest says, on November 7th, 2006, United Flight 446 was about to depart from Chicago's O'Hare International Airport when a dozen United Airline employees spotted an odd metallic craft hovering over the gate. The employees reported that it hung in the air for several minutes before finally shooting up at breakneck speed into the clouds. The strangest part? The UFO did not register on the airport's radar despite all the witnesses. The FAA declined to investigate, chalking it up to a weather phenomenon. A weather phenomenon. Seriously? Yeah. Alright there, guys. Also, for those who don't know, the FAA stands for the Federal Aviation Administration, and they're a government-run agency that deals with pretty much anything that flies. So don't get it twisted, guys. This was definitely the government deciding that they didn't want to do anything with this incident, or at the very least, they didn't want the public to know about it. But you would think that they could come up with a better excuse than a weather incident, right? Like, I don't know about you guys, but I don't think I've ever seen a weather incident cause odd metallic things to hover in the sky. Number 3 on this list is the 7 strange crafts. So this one is really interesting because the government did address it, but they definitely didn't chalk it up to being what a lot of people thought it was in Aliens. Reader's Digest says a 1952 incident where 7 unidentified objects appeared over secure airspace near the Pentagon was captured on film. The crafts were registered on radar and jets were immediately sent to investigate these suspicious strange crafts. However, when the American jets approached that airspace, those 7 objects disappeared from the radar. When the jets landed, the objects returned to the radar screen once more. President Harry S. Truman was notified, and Air Force Intelligence Director General Sanford held a press conference saying that there were reports made by credible observers of relatively incredible things. It's this group of observations that we're attempting to resolve, but there was no resolution. So we kind of just heard from the government that they were on it, but then didn't really hear anything after that. There was no resolution, or at least there wasn't one that was released to the public. Could I believe that they did actually discover something here, and they just decided that telling the public wouldn't be the best course of action? Absolutely I could. In fact, I almost guarantee it. I highly doubt that the American government would have seen this stuff and then after one pass with the jets just been like, well, alright, guess nothing's there, and then call it quits. No, they definitely would have kept investigating and looking until they discovered something. Telling the public about that though, probably wasn't in the cards. Number 2 on this list is the Richard French incident. So this is definitely one of the bigger cover-ups in UFO government history. Reader's Digest says in the 1950s it was Lieutenant Colonel Richard French's job to explain away UFO phenomena for the government. There was only one problem. Lieutenant Colonel French actually saw alien ships with his own eyes, reports the Daily Mail. At a citizen hearing on disclosure in 2013, the then 83-year-old man told the truth for the first time about what he saw as a young man in the waters of St. John's, Newfoundland, 2 UFOs that had crashed and sunk in the water, and aliens trying to fix them. They succeeded and took off. He didn't mention UFOs in his report at the time. How's that for a freaky government cover-up? Yeah, so that's about as government cover-up as we can get, guys. My guy legit says UFOs saw aliens and specifically omitted it to save face and not panic the public. I guess the guilt and also just the whole story had been eating away at him for decades though, and eventually he had to come clean and tell the public. Too little too late though with a story like this, because we never got an opportunity to investigate these aliens or talk to them or anything. Or at least, that's if he's telling the truth. For all we know, he's still leaving some parts of the story out. Only the government and Richard really know what happened. And number 1 on this list is the unexpected visitor. A man named Rick Porcels who lived in Texas got a very unexpected and unwanted visitor late one evening at his home. The story goes like this. In 2008, an unfathomably large aircraft hovered above Stevensville, Texas. Many people in the community saw it, and according to the Mutual UFO Network, a pilot named Stephen Allen reported that the unusual aircraft was flying at an estimated 3,000 miles per hour and was being chased by fighter jets. Then, a man named Rick Sorrells said he saw the same thing while hunting. Later, Sorrells says a strange man knocked on his door and said, "Son, we have the same caliber weapons you have, but we have more of them. You need to shut your mouth about what you saw." Can you imagine getting a knock on your door and it being the government basically telling you that if you say anything, you're gonna die? Yeah, that is definitely an unexpected and unwanted visitor if you ask me. So not only were they threatening citizens, I also didn't hear any reports from the government about that jet that was flying behind the UFO. You'd think that if a jet fighter were deployed to chase down an enemy aircraft in friendly airspace, the public should probably know about it to stay safe. But nope. Absolutely nothing. Total radio silence from the government. How many other times have they gone to someone's house and threatened them like this that we don't know about? How many people have been intimidated by the government to stay silent? Really scary question that, honestly, we might not even want to know the answer to.